All right, I'm going to make sure that Alan and Silas have the video, have the link at the top. All righty. Well, while we wait with bated breath for Dr. Silas Rao and Alan Savory to join us, any comments from folks about the territory we're about to wade into? And thank you, JP. I see JP is going to head out for Valentine's Day dinner. Enjoy. And look forward to seeing you later if you can make it. So just feel free to pop out when you need to and then come back. Silas! Welcome back, Silas. What? Hey, Silas, welcome. Great to see you. How you doing there, Silas?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. We are 5 hours into the 24-hour collective intelligence block party. Going strong, loving it. You'll see a bunch of friendly faces here. Ray, welcome, Ray. Good to see you.
I just want to know, are you guys staying up all night?
Well, to put it in terms of a popular 1980s song, we are going to be at it all night long. All night. All night. All night long. All night. All night. All night long. All night. All righty. And welcome back, Alan. Great to see you back, Alan. How you doing today? You're on mute. You're automatically muted. When we have as many participants as we have, now you're good. Alan, welcome back. How you doing today?
Good. Ignore my email. I was frantically trying to find where to connect, but I found it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just forwarded it to you a few minutes ago. Sorry about any confusion there. And thank you. Thank you for.
Yeah, fortunately, I never screw up.
Wow. All righty. Well, as you can see, we've now got a bunch of friends along to join us for this conversation. And just to bring folks up to speed from the conversation from yesterday, first I just want to remind everyone to kindly mute your microphone when you're not talking, and then just unmute as soon as you have something to say. And so I'll give a little bit of recap from yesterday, and then Silas, Alan, please, help me recap it better, fill in any of the blanks. But where the first thing I want to say is that both communities, both the holistic land management community, if that's a proper framing for that community, as well as the vegan community, are both passionately committed to saving life on Earth regenerating ecosystems, sequestering carbon, preserving the beautiful biodiversity that we have left, I should say. And so that's, you know, for me, already beautiful common ground for starters. And both are also in complete support and agreement in that we should support protecting and healing ecosystems in any way that we can. Now, there's a certain class of ecosystems which are the grasslands, which experience many months of dryness followed by some months of precipitation, but overall average rainfall in the low hundreds of millimeters per year, which does not make those grasslands good candidates for forests to grow, but an excellent opportunity for a symbiotic relationship between the grasses, the pollinators, insects, and animals, which can trample, eat the grasses, defecate, urinate, etc. That's how those grasslands and animals and other species co-evolved in those ecosystems in the first place. The holistic land management community is in favor of managed grazing of those grasslands for the benefit of those ecosystems and the benefit of the people who do the grazing. And whereas the vegan community is of the mindset that those ecosystems should just be left alone with no human intervention. I don't know if I'm characterizing correctly or not, but I wanted to at least. and of course, Alan, I know you'll have a lot to say about the context for this exploration, and I invite you to share on that. But perhaps just maybe a first, few words of opening from both of you. I don't know who would like to start, and kind of help bring.
Let Silas start today.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alan. Go ahead, Silas.
Okay, thank you so much for this. We had a great conversation yesterday, and I'm happy that we are continuing to have a conversation around this. Of course, I come from a very different perspective. We know that 37% of the land area of the planet is currently being used to just graze animals. And we know that of that 37% of the land area of the planet, 41% used to be forests in 1800. So they were not grasslands before. We deforested the forests and converted them into grasslands since 1800. That's only since 1800. If you go back before that, I'm sure a lot more of the grassland used to be forests. But as we cut down forests, we are going to lose rainfall, because forests create their own rain. And so we have done things to turn forests into grasslands. And the vegan community, what we are working on is trying to reverse that process. Because those grazing lands currently store only 2% of the carbon on land, even though they constitute 37% of the land area of the planet. Okay, so we estimate that if you can bring that 2% up to 20%, we can literally reverse climate change. And to do that, we have to adopt a vegan lifestyle. A vegan lifestyle frees up that land and allows us to start regenerating forests. First, begin with the forests that we know, that used to be forests in 1800. And as we regenerate the forests, the rainfall patterns are going to change, and then we can start regenerating more and more. Because if we continue the current path of using animals, exploiting animals, then not only are we going to not only are we going to have very little carbon sequestration on that land, we're also going to be emitting methane from the animals, which is, on a short-term basis, it's a much more powerful greenhouse gas than CO2. In fact, on a short-term basis, methane is the leading cause of global warming on an annual basis than even CO2. So that is our approach. And we are saying that it's also holistic because you're looking at it not just from the perspective of the animals who do not want to be exploited, but we're also looking from the perspective of the human beings who are thoroughly exploited in this system of normalized violence, who are raising the animals and who are killing the animals. They are exploited, and animal agriculture is the foundation of colonialism. It is the foundation of racism. It's the foundation of patriarchy, because what we do to animals is unthinkable, that if we start doing something like that to human beings. But when we do this to animals, it is going to spill over to people who we consider to be like animals. So it is it's a social justice issue as well as an environmental issue. And when we look at it from all these perspectives, we realize that transitioning or transforming to a system of normalized nonviolence is the only way out for humanity to reach a sustainable civilization. Because animal exploitation is not sustainable. The killing machine is not sustainable. The killing machine has to stop. And patriarchy is not sustainable. Colonialism is not sustainable. Speciesism is not sustainable. All that we consider to be good is sustainable. All that we consider to be evil is really not sustainable. But we are in a system like that at the moment. So it's a systems transformation that needs to happen, and it is already happening. That's the beauty of it. The vegan movement is growing so fast that it's on its way to becoming dominant, the majority, within the next few years. And it's up to us to make sure that we have all the systems in place to welcome that movement as it grows. So that's my opening statement. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Silas. And I really want to emphasize for everyone before I pass you the microphone, Alan, that this is designed and created as an open, exploratory conversation, and certainly not one where we intend to reach any conclusion today. And it is certainly not a debate. And so I invite everyone to really keep an open mind and really, let's make this a co-creative process. And I think we did a beautiful job yesterday, and I think we can do a really wonderful job today. And let this be the beginning of an ongoing conversation and co-exploration. And let's just see where it takes us. And let's just be very patient and compassionate, even with those who have very different points of view from our own. Alan, with those words, I welcome you, and please take it away.
Okay, thanks. And thanks, Silas, for summarizing your view of yesterday. First, again, Eamon, if I could correct you, there is no holistic land management movement. And if there was, it would fail. It would be unsustainable. Okay, I did explain that yesterday when I said, look at pygmies in the Congo, Eskimos in the far north, Arabs in North Africa, Europeans in Europe or Sweden, for example. Look at Aborigines. We're all one species. Why are we different colors, different cultures, different shapes, totally different like this? We are because our environment molds us like all animals. We are an animal, and we are molded like that. So we are inseparable from our environment. And humans are still evolving as we talk. And they're now evolving for an urban environment, different diseases, obesity, many, many different things. All right? So land and community and culture are inseparable, which I tried to explain to you and Silas. And then I also explained that effectively money is the oil that makes the world go round. It lubricates the cogs, and you can have no economy that can sustain any nation that isn't based on the green plants growing on regenerating soil. Ultimately, you can have a country with wonderful tourism industry supporting everything. You can't eat tourists. You can't eat gold. You can't eat coal. You can't eat oil. At the end of the day, our cities are maintained by food, and our civilization is maintained by food, and the economy has to recognize that, and it doesn't. All right, so I pointed these out that we can only achieve the world partially that Silas envisions is that better world by understanding what holism means. The concept was given to us in 1926 by Smuts, and it is how nature functions. So that is what we need to heed. Each one of us is an individual. You and Silas, you're individuals, but you're actually a colony of cells, biologically. You're apparently 16 trillion cells, the majority of which are bacteria. Okay? Your blood cells, blood cells, nerve cells, bone cells, etc., in whole organs, in a whole human. When you're emotionally upset, you don't feel it in your brain. You feel it throughout your body because you function as a whole human. The next whole beyond you, the next whole beyond Silas, isn't your family, isn't your children. You can't even breathe and look at me now as you're doing without your connection to green plants. Where did you get the oxygen from? Where did you get your energy to nod your head right now? You got it from green plants. You're inseparable. The next whole in nature is your connection to the environment. Even more important than your children, your family, anything else. And so it is for a tree. I could describe a tree being whole phloem cells, whole bark cells, etc., functioning as a whole tree. And the next whole in nature is not its seedlings, not its seeds it put else, and the other trees around it. The next whole in nature is the mycorrhizae and fungi and stuff around its roots in the soil. So we're now recognizing this complexity of nature. Now, human organizations are complex, humans are complex, nature is complex, but everything else isn't. Space exploration vehicles, manufacturing electricity from solar energy or any other form of energy, coal or oil isn't complex. All those things are complicated. Complexity means self-organizing, which humans, human organizations, and nature are, and our economies based on nature. So I tried to explain that if we're going to have this better world that we want, we have to recognize that. Now, I counted some of the points that Silas made when he said, you know, it used to be all forests, we need to replant forests. Before 1800, most of the world was forests. That just isn't true at all, because forests don't grow above a certain rainfall. They don't become forests above a certain rainfall. And then I gave him the example of the vast teak forests in Africa, bigger than whole states in America, where we've got millions of trees. In teak forests, it's the Rhodesian teak, not the Burmese teak, Baker plurigyria, and these are desertifying and becoming bare soil, and the trees are not regenerating. It's desertifying. Now, what is the point of planting another tree? What is the point of becoming vegan or anything else? You've got to deal with that, or there won't be any civilization in the future for humans. Now, I don't know what's happened here. My view just suddenly went all sort of cut off. Let me see if I don't know what's happened.
There's
anyway,
a toggle in the upper right between speaker view and full grid view, Alan. Gallery view and speaker view, that's in the upper right. We can see and hear you just fine, Alan, just FYI.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a computer. It helps me if I'm looking at you guys. I don't know what's happened.
It could be a different window. Look for the Zoom icon in your bar, which looks like a blue icon with a little white video camera inside of it. You might have gotten toggled into a different view, different window.
Yeah, I just can't find it. Oh, there, it's come back. You did something.
Welcome back.
You had popped it off. Anyway, I pointed out there's no point in planting another tree. It's much more complicated than planting trees and becoming vegan. If Silas is right, and the vegans become dominant and their view prevails on all other societies, God help humanity. It'll be the end of civilization as we know it. And I asked him about that yesterday. So let's discuss that a bit more. What we've learned is that if we're going to correct these things, we have to understand the cause. Why is it that civilizations have failed, that people fight and argue? Why is it that successive COP25, various UN conferences on climate change break in chaos and confusion and conflict? Why is it that every 10 years, with all the minds we have in the world, we come up with sustainable development goals at the UN, and 10 years from now, we'll develop more in a worsening situation? We just keep on like this, and more than 20 civilizations have failed. The only place we've maintained civilization for a long time is Lower Egypt, for over 10,000 years. And it took the destruction of Ethiopia and land inland to maintain that civilization, with the silt coming down the river Nile every year. Everywhere else where we've been able to maintain civilization for a relatively short time, say 4,000 years or less, we've had to do it on seashores or major rivers, because it took so many resources to feed the people in our cities. So we're facing this massive dilemma. Now, why is it we haven't been able to correct it? What we discovered, and over thousands of people worked on this with me, ending up with 2,000 scientists from various disciplines here in America. And we got some clues early in Africa, kept working on them. By 1984, roughly, we had finally understood why it was happening and that it's involved in managing complexity. Humans do not know how to manage complexity, and we've begun to learn how. Now that starts by understanding the cause, and the cause is present management. It is not livestock, it is not coal and oil, it is not any of the things that humans are blaming. There is nobody out there causing our problems. We are causing them every day by the way we manage. And humans have always managed in exactly the same way, exactly as Salish was doing yesterday. That is, advocating practices, veganism, without a context. You see, the context for promoting veganism is the problem, climate change. You cannot reduce the web of social, cultural, environmental, economic complexity. Reduce that complexity to the problem as the context or reason for your actions and promote veganism. That is, I can promise you, I can stake my life on it, that will fail. It will fail whatever practice is recommended, because the way the decision was made to select the practice is the cause of the problem. So I explained yesterday that what we've learned to overcome that is that the humans in any situation, from family to individual, can be an individual in their home, can be a family, can be a community, can be a nation, can be at the United Nations level, at any level, we need to get our arms around what it is we're managing. Who are the people making the policy decisions? Are there any people with veto power over those decisions, even though they don't make them? Who are the people affected by those decisions or influencing them? So we need to get the people in the right place. Then the people who are actually day-to-day making decisions, and it can be as lowly as the person sweeping the yard or as high as the prime minister, whoever it is that's making decisions at any level in management, we get those people together and they agree on a context, because all of us are trying to improve our lives. Now, yesterday, I gave you and Salish an example of what I call a generic holistic context. In other words, I cannot get the people of the world together. So this one I use is one I drew up myself after working with thousands of people in different cultures in India, Pakistan, all over the world. And I drew this one up and I use it to guide me as I'm listening to the news, listening to politicians, reading a research paper. This is guiding me because it's giving me a reason for all these actions. So I'd like to read it again. Okay? If I read it again to you, this is the sort of thing I think Salish, well, yesterday he said this is what he wants. So here it is. We want stable families, living peaceful lives in prosperity and physical security, while free to pursue our own spiritual or religious, or any for that matter, beliefs. Adequate, nutritious food and clean water, enjoying good education and health, in balanced lives with time for family, friends, and community, and leisure for cultural and other pursuits, all to be ensured for many generations to come on a foundation of regenerating soils, ethical and humane consideration for all life, and biologically diverse communities on Earth's land and in her rivers, lakes, and oceans. Now, when you get something like that, that all humans agree on, now you have a context, a reason, without reducing the complexity, to look at possibilities, to look at any possibilities. So if we looked at, let's just take again, the one Salish has again stressed today, of the vegan movement becoming the dominant movement. And Salish, you very kindly spelt it out yesterday. It's eating plant material, basically. Anything coming from plants, not animals. And you said there must be no killing or exploitation, etc. Colonialism, anything else. All right, so if we look at that and say, all right, that's a good idea. I don't oppose that. That's a good idea. Because I don't know until I look at it in the context. Now, you agreed yesterday, you said that all vegans, you agreed, want stable families living peaceful lives in prosperity and physical security, while free to pursue their own spiritual or religious beliefs. Do you still agree with that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so do other people. All right, so now, if we take the vegan thing and we look at the diet first, because we've agreed veganism is a good idea. So we look at the diet first, and if people want to eat nothing but plant-based diet for their own spiritual reasons, it doesn't clash with this. It's okay. It's in context for the world. If people want to eat that vegetarian diet for health reasons that they believe in their families, it's okay. It's in context with what everybody in the world, it's not going to cause war, fighting, violence. It's going to meet what you want. Now, if we look at being vegan and you can never kill and you have to be the dominant view, all right, if we look at that, I said, all right, that's a good idea. Now, that is ending up in an anti-livestock movement, anti-animals, domesticated animals, etc. So let's look at that. Now, there's a good side to it, because everything we said in this context we have, would, if we looked at animal production in factories, feedlots, inhumane treatment of pigs, chickens, it's revolting. Humans should be ashamed of ourselves. It is right out of context for all humans. Felling forests in Brazil to plant grass for cattle where they didn't grow, feeding cattle grain when they don't have beaks, and force feeding them to keep them healthy with antibiotics. It should be illegal. It's so out of context here. So the vegans are right there. Now, if we carry that to no killing and this antagonism to eating livestock, because you don't want to eat them alive, you want to kill them before you eat them. All right, so if we carry that to that, now we see if we all want stable families living peaceful lives, we have a problem. Now we have a problem because vast areas of the world that are not forests, never were forests, vast areas right across North Africa, across through Afghanistan, into Pakistan, up to China, all that land with millions of people. And that's only part of it. There's lots of Australia, United States, Canada, etc. There's vast areas of land, okay, that cannot grow crops. The rainfall is inadequate, too erratic. So therefore, those people, those millions of people, can only feed on livestock. And if they can't kill them humanely and they have to eat them alive, that's out of context. And if you say they can't kill them and you're imposing your beliefs on those people, you will end in war and you will not achieve what you want. So I just pointed that out yesterday. And I pointed out that the reason you're being vegan is to address climate change. So if we are to address climate change, but we are not able to exploit, as you would say, use animals lovingly, as pastoralists do, end their lives humanely, as they do, to feed people and to reverse desertification, etc., we don't have any other tool that can reverse desertification. I know you said we can rest the land. That's why I gave you examples of research plots in the United States that were rested to prove that if you rested the land, took cattle off it, it would recover. They didn't. They turned to desert. I showed pictures. I do it on my Facebook and everything. I showed it in TED Talks, pictures of national parks that are contributing to desert. There are no livestock there. These are just the natural animals, but they're contributing to desert, as are the forests around me in Africa. So if we're going to address that, right, we're a tool using animal. So if, let's say, vegans dominate the world and they're still trying to stop climate change, I asked you yesterday, how would you stop desertification, which occurs because of oxidation of annually dying grass plants over billions of hectares of the world? They die every year, billions of tons. And it oxidizes in sunlight, and that is a chemical breakdown. And that causes climate change, desertification. If termites eat it, it leads to methane in the atmosphere. And so I said, now how then would you deal with that? Because you cannot do it with all the money in the world, with all the creativity in the world, with all the labor in the world, until you pick up a tool. We're a tool using animal. All of us here cannot even drink water now without using technology unless we go to the nearest river and drink with our hands. We all have become totally dependent as a tool using animal. So if vegans then are going to address climate change, they've got to use a tool over that vast area. It's roughly 2/3 of the world's land. So they're going to use it every year on billions of hectares. What technology? I asked yesterday and you had no answer, and I didn't push it because there is no technology can do it. So the other tool we have as humans is fire, but fire is rapid oxidation and it exposes soil. So that's not going to do it. And for 99% of human existence, over the last million years roughly, humans only have technology and fire. So vegans need to think, what tool are you going to use then? Because your desire for a vegan ideal world is not going to happen just on straight physical fact that fire and technology cannot stop oxidation on 2/3 of the world's land every year. So we need another tool. Resting the land causes it. Fire is rapid oxidation. Technology can't solve it. And there is nothing left to humans now. I said in the TED Talk, there's nothing left but the unthinkable, and that is to use livestock.
Yeah, I respectfully disagree with that, your assertion that 2/3 of the land area of the planet can only grow grass.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said 2/3 of the land is where oxidation occurs because of seasonal rainfall, whether high or low. Now, a lot of that land, some of it is up to 1,000 millimeters of rain. You can grow forests on that, and they're full. And I've worked on those in Paraguay and Brazil and so on, right?
Yeah.
Now, an awful lot of that land is under 100 millimeters of land, and you can't grow forests on that. And
You
all of
can.
that land, and all of that land is where oxidation occurs. It doesn't occur around me here in Florida because there's enough humidity. It doesn't occur anywhere where there's enough humidity, like much of India, much of the east and west coasts of America, France, England, etc. So carry on.
Yeah, and there are a lot of scientific facts that that conflict with what you're saying, and I mean, at some point we have to just look to science and look to the numbers and see whether what you're saying is true or not. We do know that from the height database in Netherlands that 41% of the land that's currently grasslands used to be forests in 1800. There's
Is that
plenty of fossil data on that.
In the Netherlands?
Yeah, it's the height database. You can look it up. There was a paper written about it.
In the Netherlands, did you say?
Yeah, it's compiled in the Netherlands. It doesn't mean it's only from the Netherlands.
Yeah, that's what we call a non.
It's a history database of the global environment. That's what it's called. You can look that up. And I know you have said that we have to do the unthinkable, which is to increase the density of ruminants on land in order to bring back that land. And this is how we are going to preserve our civilization. First of all, I am not interested in preserving the civilization as we have it today, because it is a civilization that's based on normalized violence. It is about transforming the civilization to one that is no longer heating up the earth on a routine basis, but is starting to cool the earth on a routine basis. That's a different way of organizing ourselves. That's a different way of using our tools.
Yeah, but
because you're doing it for a different purpose. You're not trying to heat up the earth. You're trying to cool the earth. And also, when we increase the density of ruminants, we are deliberately increasing the amount of methane that's being emitted from those ruminants. And that is one of the root causes of climate change, global warming. And so, I mean, but we are not doing it just for climate change. We are doing it for all kinds of reasons. Every environmental problem points to compassion as the solution. Compassion for all life as the solution. Whether it is biodiversity loss or ecosystems collapse or climate change or our health, because of all the chemicals that we have poured into the environment, which is getting concentrated in these animal foods, and they're becoming very toxic foods. So this is why it's also not a good idea for us to eat it from a personal health perspective, not just from a physical health, but also from mental health, from a spiritual health. Everything is pointing to us that we should be giving up exploitation of animals and exploitation of other people for this purpose. So it is a transformation that we are on, and it is getting to a system of normalized nonviolence from the system of normalized violence that we are in today.
All right.
And so it's not about going back to the way we used to do things, but doing it more intelligently. It is especially with bad data, because that's not going to work.
All right. If I could comment on that, just as a minor point, the methane. If you don't put the fodder, the forage that's annually dying, if you don't biologically decay it through livestock, animals, cattle, goats, camels, buffalo, elephants, whatever, all right, it oxidizes, and then termite populations explode, and anything that breaks down cellulose puts off methane. So now you have a mass of methane and desertifying soil that cannot absorb it. Methane is short-lived in the atmosphere, and we're getting ever-increasing evidence that with the healthy soils, the methane breaks down rapidly. So just leave that one aside. When you say there's lots of facts that conflict with what I'm saying, please send them to me later if you have any, so we don't take people. I have gone to the extent when we were training 2,000 scientists, I've gone to the extent at the end of that of being desperate to get people to tell me where the logic or the science is flawed. And so I used even to give a $1,000 prize offer if anybody could find a single flaw in the science or the logic of what I was saying. We did that over 2 years, and it helped enormously to find the flaws. So if you can find them, I will publicly announce them to the world that you found a flaw in the holistic framework. I promise you that, all right? There are no facts that conflict with it. There are lots of people who are writing conflicting stuff on what they think it is. Some sort of density grazing, some sort of grazing system. It's not. Why would I use a grazing system in my house? I manage holistically in my life. It's got nothing to do with cattle. It's got to do with managing complexity. So leaving that aside now, you said, and we agreed, this, if we're going to address the issues, we have to have a context. And you agreed we want stable families, etc., adequate food, clean water. You said you agreed to this, and all vegans do. Then you say that you want vegans to be dominant because you're not interested in saving civilization, which is city-based. Now, that means you're going against what you told me you believed.
No, I said I'm not interested in continuing with the current system of normalized violence.
Well,
I'm not interested in continuing with colonialism. I'm not interested in continuing with speciesism and racism and patriarchy.
Nobody
Who is interested in that? Because that conflicts with exactly what you said. People are not going to be living happy lives when they are under the boot of another.
Those things that you're mentioning, colonialism, exploitation, they're all symptoms of reductionist management. So I'm trying to show you that if you want to have this that you said, that I put in this context, if you want that, then you have to be tolerant of the views of other people. You cannot say, we want to follow our beliefs, etc., and nobody else in the world can. You are not being tolerant. And tolerance was the one thing preached by all the great founders of our religions. And you're being intolerant,
right,
and it will lead to war.
I just want to mention, by the way, Lisa's had her hand up for quite some time waiting to make a comment. So I'd like to open it up to a degree. Alan and Silas have lots to say. So if we can keep the rest of our comments relatively brief so that we can let those experts address. But Lisa, please take it away if this is a good time for you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Lisa.
You can hear me. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So I just wanted to ask a question looking at the desert soil of Israel. And before 1948, Israel was a vast desert. And since that time, they've turned the land into usable agricultural soil that grows all kinds of things. And they pioneered very interesting and unique methods of irrigation and recapturing water. So the argument about certain areas within the world that has been used in the past to graze animals, livestock animals, I think could in fact be turned into using some of these strategies, usable land. I'd like to hear the response to that, please.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, for that. The Israelis are absolute experts at living in a desert and making little oases in it. They've got about I forget what the size of their main forest is that they've planted. They're very proud of it. I visited it once when there and at a conference and traveling around and looking at it. And they're spending millions and millions of dollars on earthworks that's using technology. And then they're using it to plant trees that they've raised in nurseries, and they've got plastic tubes around them to protect them and very small bits of technology. And that funnels the water from large areas which are desertifying onto smaller areas, demands, I think they call some of them, And I went there where different nations came and planted their flag by a tree, and everybody was gung-ho. And it's tragic, because all you're doing is what the Nabateans did for 2,000 years. They've tried to harvest runoff water, which is non-effective rainfall, that's desertification, from a big area, conduct it to a small area, and they're doing this in Jordan with permaculture and so on. And these are wonderful efforts, but they take water from a large area, produce high production on a very small area, and it's a band-aid on a dying patient. The desertification of Israel is shocking, and where I was in Israel for the conference and so on, the Israelis are trying to get rid of the livestock, and they're settling the Bedouin, and they're making towns for them. I had dinner with the mayor of one town, and the men are being paid money to support their families if they don't run livestock, and they're paid on the number of children they have. What do you think the men are doing? They're breeding. And I had dinner with the mayor of the one city, and he asked me, and he said, "Alan, what do you think the average age of my citizens is?" And I said, "I have no idea." He said, 12 years old. He's the mayor of a town with citizens average age 12 years old. That's one of the indirect, unintended consequences of reductionist management. And the Israelis, like all governments, cannot see it. Can't hear.
Thank you, Alan. And sorry, Lisa, sorry,
I
Lisa.
was going to say, I will ask my son about it. He is now the Palestinian Affairs correspondent for the New York Times in Israel. So I will ask him about that, because he meets with dignitaries every day of the week. So I think we don't want to make a mistake and look at one community and extrapolate that to all of Israel. I think we have to look at what various communities are doing to turn desert land and make it productive to grow fruits and vegetables. They're also doing desalination work as well, and that's certainly another way to get water without just reclaiming it. So I think there are other strategies, and I think we need to look at these, because these will have a beneficial effect on greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes, if I could add, Lisa, you're right, and there are people doing desalination. There's lots of wonderful efforts. Most people are good. Most people are doing their best. All right, so there are many efforts to use technology. I said there's only technology and fire. So I visited the nearby United Arab Emirates, and they've put in an incredible effort. I saw their big forests. They've spent over $30 billion, drip irrigation from the sea, planting these trees, and the desert sand is just blowing through them. Total failure. You cannot stop desertification with technology, period.
Well, we do know we will cause change to the climate if we are grazing less animals. We have to allow the climate to heal. And if we have less evolution of greenhouse gas emissions from the vast number of livestock that are raised around the world, that is going to positively impact climate change. It has to.
It is. The way the livestock are run around the world, it's contributing to climate change. The way the livestock are run in America is contributing to climate change. The way we're managing our national parks is contributing to climate change. All of it's reductionist management. And that's why I'm advocating holistic management. And then that same livestock starts to reverse the desertification when we manage it differently, because it's a management problem. It's only management that's causing the problems, not livestock.
Educating people. People still don't understand when they eat flesh food, the carnitine amino acid that's only present in flesh food becomes converted into trimethylamine, which is an intermediary metabolite by gut bacteria. This trimethylamine travels to the liver of humans. It gets converted into trimethylamine N oxide, and that chemical is necessary to lay down atherosclerotic plaque. So you interrupt that mechanism at the source by stopping the ingestion of carnitine, you necessarily stop the deposition of atherosclerotic plaque in arteries. When people understand that, they're going to eat less meat. And they're essentially going to want to select for the gut bacteria that don't know how to make trimethylamine oxide. So we can address it from a health perspective as well, which is education. Not healthy to smoke, not healthy to eat meat of all kinds, because any animal product is going to contain carnitine just like an animal product contains cholesterol.
Yes, we're going to have to use everything. Education is a major part of holistic management, and we now have about 50 locally led and managed hubs around the world where people are just starting to accept that there'll never be leadership from a politician or an institution, and people are just beginning to manage holistically. And we even have the first university-led hub. Now, universities have ridiculed me, tried to crush my work, tried to ban my work. I was banned from setting foot on any campus of any university for over 20 years in Southern Africa. And now, at last count, there were 20 universities using my textbook. So yeah, change is coming. Those people weren't being bad. Nothing has changed since Galileo. Institutions fight to the death over new paradigm shifting knowledge. They never accept it until the public begins to, through education of the public.
Well, they're beginning to. There's a school district in my neighborhood where the superintendent is vegan, and he's now got vegan options for public school children. It's incredible. Small changes are happening.
Correct, and that is wonderful if those kids and their parents believe it spiritually, or if they believe it's good for their health, that's wonderful. But if they're doing it for the environment, then they're doing a disservice to all of humanity.
Well, I disagree with that, because I think all we have to do is find one of the three concepts in being vegan, either for the animals, for the environment, or for our health. And once one of those elements rings through to an individual, they become more sensitive to the other remaining two. And then suddenly they become an animal rights person. They become an environmentalist. I started out with health, and now I would classify myself as an ethical vegan. If you said, would I be an ethical vegan 15 years ago, I would have said, not on your life. But I learned, and I think other people will learn just like I did.
Yeah, and I hope they'll keep learning. And you say you're an ethical vegan, and I put out a blog sometime with the help of a vegan friend asking what about ethics. What is ethics? Does it mean being ethical to another human being? Ethical to an animal? What does ethics mean?
The primary motivator in veganism. And for me, it goes beyond food. Those who just consider eating vegan food and not eating animals, we would consider to be plant-based. But once you call yourself, I mean, in our community, once we call ourselves vegans, we're concerned in all elements, in cosmetics, in exploiting animals for entertainment, in the clothing that we wear. My home is now completely vegan. I have probably less than 1/10 of 1% of something in my home that has been made from animals. I don't think I can ever reach 100%. I think there are probably glues and furniture and things like that that I have no control over. But anything I buy, in fact, we passed a law. I was part of the team that passed the first ever Cruelty-Free Cosmetics Act in the state of California. And what that means is, starting January 1st, 2020, any new testing on cosmetics, and that includes not only makeup, but hair care, body care, shampoo, all of the products we put on our bodies, can no longer be tested on animals. They have to use in vitro methods. They cannot use large animals, or they will not be able to sell these products in the state of California. So it's not wiping products off the shelf. It's just saying any new product, because companies always come up with new fragrances and new formulas that require testing. You can no longer sell that in the 5th largest economy in the world, and that is California. And that was our collective victory, put forth by two organizations, Social Compassion in Legislation and the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, both of whom I work with very closely.
I praise you for that. And anything that avoids cruelty to animals is good. But, you know, to be ethical, we have to be ethical to the environment as well, all right? Otherwise, we're not being ethical to all life. Now, that's
Of course.
my question. So you come from California, and California is in a very bad way with mega fires, with landslides and problems. The desertification of Southern California is appalling, including in wildlife refuges and so on. It's appalling, and you've got people in California who are fighting like anything to produce the algae and the algal cover on soils, and you're getting more and more mega fires, more and more what people are now attributing to climate change. And my question to you then, again, as to Salish, is how are you going to deal with that with technology and fire?
We have to put in place behaviors that will limit greenhouse gas emissions as much as we can and as vigorously as we can. And it's a multi-pronged problem that has to be addressed by what we put on our plate every day. One of the frustrations with the Fire Drill Fridays program, which Jane Fonda is leading, and Joaquin Phoenix was there last week in Los Angeles, one of the problems is they're focusing on fossil fuels. So as an individual, there isn't a whole lot I can do. I drive a Prius. I know it's not the most environmentally friendly car, but it's better than driving a gas car. So I drive my Prius, and I'm plant-based, but there's not a whole lot that I can do in terms of fossil fuels, except with my vote. But I can affect greenhouse gas emissions by the choices I make to put food in my mouth and in the mouth of my family members. And I continue, and I teach, and I'm on a platform, Jane Unchained News, and we have over 1 million followers. And every day of the week, our 70 contributors, there's some of them on this panel right now, who try to do everything we can to wake people up so that they can begin to travel down this path. And I think when we travel down the path, we become more aware. We will vote more judiciously towards hopefully environmentally conscious president and elected officials, which is really where it's at. I've learned so much about legislation working with social compassion legislation the past few years. It's not that hard to get a bill passed. You need a concerted, just like Margaret Mead said, you know, there isn't anything a concerted, I'm probably butchering her famous quote, but there isn't anything a concerted group of individuals can't accomplish. And we've been able to do that. So what Dr. Rao is doing is he's trying to mobilize the troops on a variety of levels. And I honor him for that. And I think that's where we need to go. But there's other places too. We need to attack it from a multitude of levels. But I'm not willing to give up, and I'm going to fight to the death.
You know, I praise you for that. But now let's be, have you got a family?
Yes, I do.
You care for them?
Absolutely.
When I read this context out, would you go with that?
Sure. I mean, it depends what the context is. I have to agree to the context.
Well, let me read it again. If you agree with this,
okay.
All right, we want stable families living peaceful lives in prosperity and physical security, while free to pursue our own spiritual or religious or other beliefs. Adequate nutritious food and clean water, enjoying good education and health, in balanced lives with time for family, friends, and community, and leisure for cultural and other pursuits, all to be ensured for many generations to come on a foundation of regenerating soils, ethical and humane consideration for all life and biologically diverse communities on Earth's land, in our rivers, lakes, and oceans. You go with that?
I have to break in here for a second. So your context, I am really sorry, but your context is humanistic, not holistic. And the fact that you add a statement on the end that says that we have to have reverence for all life does not negate the fact that you are willing to slaughter other beings and use them for human pleasure. So while I have not seen every study that the two of you have talked about, I listen to that context, and all I can think is that you are tied totally to to humans as being the only ones for whom this context matters, and that saying these few words at the end makes it all okay. It does not make it all okay. And the forests have not gone away, nor have the prairies or the grasslands or any other places, all by themselves. Humans have done that, and humans need to change that. And so the culture that we have lived in, all the cultures, all the current cultures, most of the current cultures, I don't know them all, have worked to destroy the earth and other living beings, whether they have done that intentionally or not. And we need to be working to intentionally bring life back, and not to buy in to the idea that, oh dear, we're going to have to use some of these animals and sacrifice them. And I just need to be very clear. There is no such thing as humane slaughter. You can slaughter beings, and you could be humane, but you cannot do that at the same time. It is an impossibility. It cannot happen. So I'm sorry, Lisa, I did not mean to cut you off, but I feel
no,
like—
that's fine. I agree with you. I agree with everything you said. You're absolutely correct. I don't see any beneficial aspect of killing animals. I just don't see that. And if there's no motivation, the motivation people have for killing and eating animals is they somehow think there's something magical in the proteins of animals that doesn't exist in plants. But that comes from people who don't understand that the purveyors of protein on this planet are plants. They are the only organisms besides some fungi that are able to, oh my gosh. Hold on a second, I gotta call him.
And
There are no other organisms on the planet besides fungi and plants who can fix nitrogen gas from the atmosphere. So plants are the purveyors of all proteins. We do not need to eat animals, and that's a message people, the public, needs to understand, because most members of the public believe there's something magical in eating an animal and that they'll get better quality protein and be healthier. And that's just untrue.
If I could just say just one thing on the killing, it's a slight aside, but Anne brought it in. I was reading something from vegans recently, and they strongly object to farmers raising animals for slaughter. And I just did point out that they don't actually raise them for slaughter, they raise them for food. There's a very big difference, because if you say they're raising them for slaughter, then you've got millions of vegans in the cities that are raising cats and dogs for slaughter, because most of them will, at the end of the day, take their animals to a vet to be euthanized and put out humanely in their old age. And we don't have ranchers and farmers saying vegans are raising pets to slaughter, because they're not. They're raising them for enjoyment or whatever, but not for slaughter. And farmers are not raising animals for slaughter. Manufacturing factory stuff, yes, it may be. I'm not going there. Everybody's against that. But we need to be careful with our wording, because they're not being raised for slaughter. They're being raised to people.
Well, talking about euthanasia, I'm sorry, talking about euthanasia is a different thing. So yes, there are still a lot of people who euthanize their pets when they are very old and sick. And most of that has to do with the fact that we don't have enough money to do the kind of medical care that we do on people. And whether euthanasia is right or wrong is also a hugely other conversation. People who raise and live with cats and dogs and other companions do not kill them at the age of 6 months or 12 months or 1 year, nor do they eat them, nor do they skin them and use their skin. I think that you're, I'm sorry, that is just too much. It just goes too far. So I'd be happy to have a conversation on euthanasia, but then I want to include humans in that conversation, and whether or not we should be able to euthanize our family members when they are dying and cannot make it, or will bankrupt the entire family if we try to keep them alive. But that is not the same thing that farmers do to their animals. So please do not confuse.
I'm not confusing it. I'm just saying vegans should not be saying that farmers raise their animals for slaughter. They raise them to feed people, all right? And most
Yes, and the
farmers,
only way to
ranchers,
feed
and
them to people
pastoralists,
is to kill them.
most farmers, ranchers, and pastoralists are terribly loving about their animals. They love their animals. And then
Okay.
they end their lives as humanely as they can. Let's not sidetrack onto that. I want to come back to Lisa.
That's not a sidetrack. That's one of the main points,
Yeah,
Alan. That is one of the main points. That is not a sideline. And I am sorry, but it is not true that you love someone and gleefully take them and kill them at a young age in a horrific way. And we have found that in every backyard slaughterhouse, in every factory farm slaughterhouse. That is not a sidetrack. That is one of the main tracks. I'm sorry. Pretending that the killing, we can't eat an animal until we kill him. Well, some people, I suppose there are some animals that people eat live, but the vast majority, and certainly when we're talking about cows, pigs, and chickens, have to be killed before we can eat them. So I'll change my language to farmers raise animals for people to eat. Along the way, they must be killed for that to happen. And so playing with the language here is really difficult for me.
I'd like to get back to seriously, if we're going to solve these problems, all right, if we're going to solve them and not just go to war and conflict and fight each other, as vegans are tending to do, all right, and others, if we're not to do that and we genuinely want stable families for our grandchildren, a stable world, I read out this context. You took me to task for saying ethical and humane consideration for all life and biologically diverse communities on earth and land, rivers and lakes. Most people agree with that. There may be a very small proportion in the world that don't want ethical consideration for all life. I stand by what is written here because most people want that. Now, if we want that, and I can return, Lisa, to your comment about California, etc. You went on and on about those things in California, but at the end of the day, and they're good, what you've done is amazing, and not putting it down in any way, but at the end of the day, California has to stop the desertification. The floods, the droughts, the mega fires that are getting worse and worse.
It's weather patterns that have done that. It isn't necessarily, I mean, certainly we're grazing animals for food. We're grazing animals, and I think it's, they have to be slaughtered in order to become food, but I don't want to get caught in the semantics of that. Certainly, if we raise less animals and we cut down the population of animals that we're raising for food, and instead we raise other forms of protein and dark leafy green vegetables, mushroom farming is something that we're now looking at for replacing the production of chickens. So there's so many other types of things that we can raise that are fairly easy that we need to do, and that is going to help. California has always been a leader, and we want to be a leader in the future. Some of the issues have to do with subsidies, and I think some of the issues have to do with subsidies, and that's probably what we need to focus on next is the federal subsidies, because it's like the Trump administration, it's like how the Trump administration is running the world right now. Our subsidies to animal agriculture are nothing less than an insane strategy. We're paying people to produce eggs, and what's interesting is you will never see an egg commercial where the egg industry says eggs are healthy, they've got lots of protein, they're good for you. All you see in the egg industry, let's think about it. Have you seen any of the egg commercials? Do you remember any of what the taglines in the egg commercials? Does anybody remember?
Well, you're preaching to the choir.
Right. So they say eggs, it's what's for breakfast. They say eggs, the incredible edible egg. There's nothing in those two comments, which are the taglines that they use over and over again, about eggs being healthy, because they're not healthy. And because the industry is prohibited, according to the United States Department of Agriculture, to say something that is blatantly false. It's too high in protein and it's too high in fat, and no one should be eating them. So if they object, I'll be done in a second. If they object, if they say these things, they lose their funding, they lose their subsidies. We need to attack the subsidies as a culture in the United States and let the price just elevate to what it should be minus the subsidies. Maybe people would start listening to the data about how bad eggs are for us and how bad dairy is for us, and it probably will take care of itself. We're seeing that now. Did you know that now in California there is a movement? I just read an article yesterday to start selling milk and make it sexy and other dairy products in dispensaries where they're selling cannabis. Target the millennials and get them to start drinking milk again. It's insane.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
Please
Yes, please do.
Please try not to digress onto long things that take us off what is serious. All right? If you stopped all carbon, I'm going back in your discussion, I'm having to go back quite far now because it went too long. If you stopped all carbon, all fossil fuel use, 100%, all right? The things that are causing climate change still need to be addressed, and they're not going to be addressed by being vegan. They are the global finance driving environmental destruction, which is reductionist management. They are the fact that mainstream agriculture, that's why I said you're preaching to the choir, that I am totally opposed to, all right, is the most destructive industry ever in the history of mankind. We're producing more than 20 times as much eroding dead soil as food we need for every human alive today, with American-led, university-led, institutional stupidity agriculture. That's got to be addressed. We are burning every year billions, every year, of the world's grasslands and putting far more pollutants into the air than cars do, all right, in the same time. Now, we are burning, not annually, but every few years, not billions of acres, but millions of acres of tropical wet forests to put bloody cattle on them, which we shouldn't be doing. All right, this is all, these things all have to be dealt with. Our national parks are contributing to climate change, where you cannot blame anything. You can't blame corporate greed, you can't blame ignorance, you can't blame anything. And our national parks are contributing to climate change. So I'm trying to get something done about all of these. So
putting out oxygen into the atmosphere, taking in carbon dioxide and putting out oxygen.
I've missed the first part.
Educate me how the forests are contributing to climate change.
I said some of the forests are around us in Africa, and the national parks are in New Mexico and around us in Africa. They're deep arroyos, gullying, eroding dead soil, which is all putting carbon into the atmosphere. All this has to be dealt with. Now, what I'm asking you as a vegan with a family, if you care for your family, is to open your mind to please try and focus on that for a moment. In California, the desertification is very serious indeed, particularly as you go south, right? You said it's due to climate and the weather change. No, it's not. Desertification is one of the major causes of climate change. Desertification started roughly 50,000 years ago, all right? And it's been steadily expanding around the world. I listened to a very excellent California woman giving a talk many years ago in which she said, if you'd viewed us, the Earth, from space over the last few thousand years, you would describe humans as a desert-making species. Now, California is part of that, all right? Now, many years ago, I was in the Bay Area giving a talk, and I loved it. A paleobotanist spoke before me, and he put a slide up, and he just kept quiet. And I looked at the slide, and everybody was looking at it, and I thought, wow, what is that? Is that the Serengeti in Africa? It was just teeming animals all over it. And then I realized, no, that's a saber-toothed tiger. That's not a lion. And that's something else, you see. And he just kept quiet. And then he started his speech by saying, I want you all to understand that 9,000 years ago, all of these animals existed in the Bay Area in California. All of those were killed out by humans, all right? California wasn't desertifying when it had all those animals. California, the southern part of California, is desertifying because it's over-rested. And nothing is dealing with the oxidation. Now, as a mother, you need to be concerned about that. And my question to Salish and you is, all right, as a tool-using animal, as vegans, how are we going to correct that? We can use technology, and we've had the Israeli lady and others draw attention to, yes, technology can plant trees, grasses, etc., but that's using technology to geoengineer. You shouldn't need to plant these things. They should be growing. Technology cannot solve the problem. And then we've got fire. Now, what else have you got? Resting the land causes desertification. Fire aggravates it. And no technology, even imaginable in science fiction, could ever deal with that over 2/3 of the world's land, where this is occurring to varying degrees every year. So what should we do?
The last thing we should be doing is doing more killing. That, continuing with the killing that we have already been doing over the last
Accept that.
years.
Accept that. Let's accept we never kill. We never kill again. Now, what are you going to do?
We have to bring back the forests that we lost. We cut down those forests. They didn't go away on their own. We cut them down. We're doing that every year. We see 30 million acres of forests being destroyed every year and converted into grasslands and soybean lands, for growing soybeans. This is not the first year that we've been doing it. We've been doing it every year. And it's about returning back the forests that we lost. I'd start with where the forests are now, where we are cutting them down, and then bring them back. And slowly, as the forests grow, the rainfall patterns will change. And it will allow us to grow more forests around the forests that we have regenerated.
You're just going back to planting forests. And when I asked you about the vast forests that are around where I live in Africa that are desertified, and they've got millions of trees, I said, what's the point in planting more trees?
Well, bring back the Congo first and expand that before you go off and try and, some teak plantation that you're talking about that the British did sometime to build more ships. I don't know what the context there is. So I don't understand, why you're
talking about Southern California. Can we keep
cutting down forests around the Congo? We're cutting down forests around the Amazon. Let's bring that back and start growing those forests.
No,
changing the rainfall patterns back to what they used to be.
About Southern California. Let's not divert because we won't solve problems. We're talking about Southern California. Now, Northern California has enough rainfall and it's forested, etc. And it's not desertifying because it's more humid. Southern California has got much longer dry periods, much lower rainfall. It was not forested and it's desertifying seriously. So I'm asking Lisa and any other vegans, what should we do in Southern California? Because California is a leading state and it could take leadership. So what should we do? Technology can't solve it.
What happened to all the redwood forests that used to be in California? What happened to all the sequoia forests that used to be in California? We cut them down. Over the years, we cut them down, okay? We burnt them up. And now the response to the fires is to cut more old growth trees. That's what the Trump administration is doing right now. It's the exact opposite of what we should be doing, which is regenerating those forests.
You cannot just state that Southern California was forest. It wasn't. It is low rainfall. You've got to understand that the whole world wasn't forests. The great green growing areas of the world are because they're on deep soils. They're not forests. They're former grasslands. And Southern California was essentially grassland. So I'm again asking, please, as vegans, we're trying to solve the problem. Let's not just go back to constantly repeating that everybody cut the forests out and we've got to plant forests. That just true.
But we're growing soy and corn for feed for livestock. We need to grow feed for people.
Agree with
food for people.
Agree.
And we have the very lush Central Valley of California that is a leading distributor of food and feed to the world. We just need to convert it to food as opposed to livestock feed.
Okay, let me agree with you, totally. We need to not be growing any food for livestock. I absolutely agree. And if we were managing towards this context we agreed on, nobody nobody would be doing it, because everybody is violating this by reductionist management. All right, so yes, we've agreed we don't kill any animals. We've agreed we convert all food to humans, not animals. And I'm still asking you now, what do you do about Southern California? The Central Valley is irrigating. It's taken vast areas of land to provide that water. I don't know if you ever read Cadillac Desert by Mark Rosner, amazing book on the incredible engineering and environmental destruction in America to provide that water to irrigate, and it's salinating. And most of California is not the Southern Valley. When you go south, the Central Valley. So what are we going to do to save your family? I'm trying to save your family.
I'm going to jump in here. I've been listening for quite a few hours now, if I may. And I have a question. And the question is, we're working as a collective to come together. I'm on my video so you can hear me. We're putting together a collective to co-create solutions. And we all are coming from different backgrounds and different perspectives. So how are we going to put together different? Can you hear me?
Sweetie, no, we can barely hear you. It's very broken. That's why I stopped your video to see if we can channel more bandwidth.
Can you hear me?
Sweetie, can you type in your, read it out loud?
How are we going to put together different voices to come up with a solution? And I haven't yet heard anyone talk about other species besides humans. So how are we going to restore?
I can't hear this at all.
Okay.
Melissa,
Is that better?
or no? Can you not hear us? Melissa.
I'll type it in. I'll type it in. Sorry, guys.
I can't hear either.
Yeah, Melissa, could you please type it in instead, because
I'm typing it in. So, okay.
can you type it in instead, because it's just scrambled. Thank you.
I'm doing it.
All right. Other people have been
Okay.
comments, some for time.
Yes.
All right. So let's see. Evan would like to talk. Jorge would like to talk, and Patricia has had her hand up, I think, longer than I've been alive. Anyway, so but Evan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring up something that I think Melissa was maybe trying to talk about. I could pick out, like, we were really focused on the human aspect of this, because from my point of view, I'm not certain why it is we can't return these grasslands to the ruminants that we wiped out long ago. I mean, that's kind of what I assume. I'm not super versed in what has caused the desertification, but if the ruminants are a key component to a healthy grassland, I don't see why we can't reintroduce the ruminants to the grasslands, the now deserts of Southern California, and just not slaughter them. I don't know why. I mean, is there a reason why the idea of nonviolence and then ruminants reintroduced to the grasslands are mutually exclusive, or why can't these get along? Because I think we're trying to find a way to input what humans are getting out of this ruminant grassland relationship, whether it be a food forest or meat from the animals, and maybe what we can get out of it best is just the fact that this environment could operate healthily is going to benefit all other subsequent environments.
Absolutely, I agree with you. We can do both.
The problem with that,
we can do both. The Tool Elk, for instance, in Point Reyes, does a much better job of bringing back the grasslands there than having cows walking around. You know, so wild ruminants are an important part of the solution.
could I reply to yours? You know, this, when I read out a holistic context, that is the way we have learned how to solve the drug policy, the terrorist policy. Every policy you look at in the United States is unsound, all right? We're just getting digressed, always digressed onto animals while people are dying. And Europe is getting flooded with immigrants, changing the face of Europe. It's going to lead to more and more violence and breakdowns in governments. We've got a serious problem on our hands. Serious problem, right? So we need to focus on that. We should have put this on a war footing long ago, like we did in the Second World War, where the Allies won by extremely good leadership, using all the science available, etc. Now, we've got something to unite humans, climate change. We're in this as team humanity, and we've got to start getting serious about it, right? So I'm trying to do that. And when we look at this context, I said, this is a generic one. Everywhere that people manage, it's up to them to do it depending on their culture, their beliefs. So if the people of Southern California were doing this and managing holistically, and the policies were developed this way, if they realized, as they have to, that nothing but livestock now can stop the desertification of California. Nothing can do it. There isn't anything in the world. Right, do it, and they don't want to kill, up to them. Not up to us to interfere and impose our beliefs on them. If they decide that, and they will have to decide how they want to feed themselves. Remember, agriculture is not crop production. People think of agriculture as crop production. It isn't. It's the production of food and fiber from the world's land and waters. Almost the entire planet, including the oceans, is now involved in agriculture. We're over-harvesting the oceans. What are you going to do that with vegan policy? We've got to deal with it. This deals with it. This starts to deal with all of these things. If we can pull together as team humanity and say, we want better lives like this, stable environment, peace, and all of these things, ethical behavior towards all animals and all life. If we can put that above our passion for being a vegan. So if you want to be a vegan, yes, be a vegan for spiritual or health reasons. But if you want to be for environmental reasons, have a look at this and you realize, oh my God, we'll only lead to war. We can't impose our beliefs on everyone. So if the people of Southern California decide they don't want to kill, that's up to them. Now, if you impose that on everybody, you're going to have major wars because millions and millions of people cannot sustain their families on anything except animals. Nothing else digests the cellulose plants and converts it to a human food.
Alan,
nothing else does that. And so millions of people, if you impose your beliefs, you will end with them dying, starving, and they will go to war.
Alan, do you eat cashews?
Sorry?
Do you eat cashews in New Mexico?
Yeah.
Do you grow cashews in New Mexico?
No, I don't live
Then how did you get it?
I don't live in New Mexico. But what's your point?
You know, but the point is, you are assuming that we are only eating whatever we are growing around us, but that's not the case today. We do have technology that allows us to eat plant-based foods that are grown a little bit further away. So you're saying, how can people, in these areas sustain themselves? assuming that they only have to eat what is right there.
Well, I'm talking of the people all over Tunisia, all over North Africa, Sudan, North and South, most of Egypt, much of Kenya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, you know, Australia, vast areas of the world. We cannot grow crops.
They're growing animals to sell to Europe. You know, basically they destroyed their environment. I've been to Ghana, and in Ghana, I know what is going on. They are taught to eat animal foods because the colonizing powers have made them think that that's the only way to eat.
Again,
they have papayas falling on their heads, but they're not eating that. They have mangoes falling on their heads. They're not eating that.
Silas, again, you're trying to force your beliefs onto the world.
I'm just giving you an observation of what I saw, okay?
Yes, but you cannot force, if you agreed to this, and you did, you said you agreed for all people to pursue their own spiritual beliefs, etc. We'll have a peaceful world. We'll have all that you dream of.
If your spiritual beliefs involves exploiting me, should I accept that? If your spiritual religious beliefs involves exploiting me because I look different, should I accept that?
No, what in this says that?
No, you said anything that goes, right? If you say any spiritual belief goes, any cultural belief goes,
I said
if that involves exploiting other beings.
Situation, do this. And I said this is a generic one that most people would agree to. So if people in any area said we want stable families, etc., physical security while free to pursue our own spiritual and religious beliefs, that's okay. But don't try to impose them on everybody.
Why do you think I'm forcing anyone to, forcing my beliefs on anyone?
Well,
no,
I
have to jump in here. I have to jump in here and say, with respect to Silas, Dr. Rao, he's not forcing his beliefs. I think there's a problem with the terminology here. He's making suggestions. He's not trying. He's got his belief system. I have mine. I like to think that I'm open-minded enough. If somebody says something that makes sense and I research it and I can change my opinion. But at this point, I don't see any benefit of strategizing to maintain the consumption of animals when it really does no good to the planet. It certainly doesn't help our health. It certainly doesn't help the evolution of limiting the evolution of greenhouse gas emissions. The bottom line is, according to Dr. Rao's white paper, 87% of greenhouse gases come from animal agriculture. And if we address that, we'll get a huge response. And then we have fossil fuels and we have other ways. You talked about greenhouse gas emissions from the forest.
If Silas says 80%, whatever it is, of the greenhouse gases coming from animal production, all right, that is factory animal production that I am totally against. That is what would stop.
Right, but that's where people get cheap food. That is where people get inexpensive food. We're not looking at meeting the need. Switching it to a non-factory farm model is going to be even more resource intensive. If people are going to continue to eat meat, it doesn't make sense. We need to evolve as a people. We need to evolve as a culture. We don't need to. I mean, do you follow a plant-based diet? Do you eat some meat? Where do you stand personally in your behavior?
I eat a lot of meat. I'm an omnivore. Look at my teeth. I'm an omnivore. My whole system. I evolved.
So your teeth are more flat. You don't.
Years as an omnivore, and I'm an omnivore.
Okay, well, actually, you can eat meat, but your teeth are more consistent with an herbivore because your jaw
I don't have a
moves from side to side.
I don't have a herbivore's teeth. I have an omnivore's teeth. If I was meant to be a herbivore, I'd have a herbivore's teeth. I do understand those things as a biologist. That I don't have insectivorous teeth. I don't have carnivore's teeth. I have an omnivore's teeth. I don't have a herbivore's
You can, because you can eat both, and we evolved to be able to eat both. But even when you look at Paleolithic times, we didn't eat very much meat because it was hard to get. Our eyesight is not strong like animals of prey. Our hearing is not strong like animals of prey. Our sense of smell, our olfactory sense, is not strong. And we have a long intestine compared to a carnivore. So we can do very well eating plants and grinding them because our jaws move laterally. So if I did blood tests on you, and judging from what I imagine your age is, I imagine you're over 55. Would I be correct in saying that?
I'm 75 this year.
Okay, wonderful. I'm 65. So I'm just 10 years younger than you are. And I've been doing this now for about 12 years. But what I see when I measure, I'm also a nurse, retired from nursing, but I will tell you, when we measure certain parameters in your blood, it will show that you're not as healthy as other people. You can look great you can look great on the outside. You look like you're a person who's trim. Doesn't seem to me that you have any problem with weight, but we need to look at the health of arteries. And, you know, when we make policies for people, we need to make policies not for the extremes, 2 standard deviations away from the mean. We want to make policies that head towards the bulk of the population. All right, I see your hand is up. So when we look at these blood work, we see blood work more consistent with people that eat a whole food plant-based diet that are healthier, because right now heart disease is our #1 killer. So the less meat we eat, the less dairy products we eat, the less plaque is deposited in all of the arteries of our body, from your brain to your sexual organs to literally perfusion of blood and oxygen to your toes.
Why I put my hand up is, again, you're preaching to the choir. I keep saying every policy of natural resources in this country, including agriculture, is faulty. I'm trying to talk to you about how to correct it. All right? And if we keep digressing into bits of the problem, it's a holistic issue. Let me give you an example. When I was training, I came to this country as an exile, political exile, all right? And Americans knew of my work. And shortly after getting here, I was commissioned by the USDA over 2 years to put 2,000 scientists and others through training from all the government agencies, land management agencies, the agricultural universities, the World Bank, USAID, right? Now, when we did that training, they brought hundreds of their own policies, and they helped with the development of the holistic framework to address complexity. And in doing that, by the end of it, as I said earlier, we could not find any flaws in the science or the process. And in doing that and in analyzing their own policies, they concluded, not me, that every single policy they brought to the training would fail, would worsen the situation, lead to unintended consequences. This is everything: agriculture, drugs, droughts, floods, you name it, the policies. Policies to save small towns by the World Bank, etc. Now, one group in training made a statement that we published 40 years ago. They said, we now recognize that unsound resource management is universal in the United States. Now, similar training that I did in India, in Lesotho, Zimbabwe, smaller samples came up with the same thing. We're talking about all of our policies being insane, unsound. So when you keep preaching at me about the unsound policies, you're just talking to the choir. I'm trying to get you beyond that to talk about how to solve it. Let me give you an example with agriculture, because if we could put the agricultural policy right, it would begin to correct many, many things. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to do it in a big nation because there's too many divided views, it's too complex with a big nation. I think we may achieve it with a small nation in deep trouble and a more dictatorial government. So that's why I concentrate on my own country still, and concentrate on other small countries, or we might achieve it in a country like Australia, where Australians are very irreverent. And unlike most Americans, etc., very compliant. Australians aren't like that. We might be able to break through there. But we did get a chance in Zimbabwe. Okay, now what we did was we put on a workshop for 35 members of parliament. Now they came from opposing parties that make Republicans and Democrats look like kids playing together in the playpen. They were killing each other. There was so much violence. Agriculture is the big issue, agriculture and land. Our staff pleaded with me not to talk about agriculture. They said it would erupt into violence. I said, don't worry about what I'm going to do. When I got there, I had these 35 members of parliament, hostile groups, different tribes, etc. We talked about agriculture. I reminded them that their prime minister in 1980s said, we do not have a bigger problem than our deteriorating land and our rising population. He said, we politicians do not know what to do. All we can do is take the advice of our professional advisors, and when it goes wrong, we get the blame. I believe that's true of every politician in the world. The professional advisors are the ones leading to these policies. Now, I talked to them about that, and I said, the way policies are developed by all governments is they reduce the complexity of the whole community, environment, and economy to feeding the nation a problem, whatever it is, and that is reductionist, and it leads to these problems. So what I want us to do now is to develop a national holistic context. So what I read out to you here, we developed one for us, our nation, and we developed it and agreed on it. And when everybody agreed on that, it suddenly ceased to be two parties, different political parties getting to fight. It suddenly became 35 Zimbabweans trying to solve the problem. And by the end of the workshop, we had the policy the world dreams of. We would be the first country in the world producing more food than dead eroding soil. We'd have no such things as third-party endorsements, organic, sustainable. There'd be none of that. The reason was because all food would be clean, healthy, nutritious, growing on regenerating soil. We would put millions more people back on the land out of city slums. We would increase the tax base of government. In doing that, we would decrease the whole bureaucracy, dominating people and corporate control, etc., of agriculture. All of that would come about. And every bit of knowledge we had was in the room. In the room. What is causing the problem? What is causing conflicts? What is causing you to be in conflict with me is reductionist management that is universal with all humans. We argue from our point of view, having reduced the complexity to meeting a need, meeting a desire, or addressing a problem, which we are doing. And that's why you see me advocating I'm not advocating any practice except manage holistically. It's the only thing I know that is scientifically sound, socially sound, environmentally sound, and will bring peace, prosperity to the world.
Does our food system need to change?
Our food system, yes, absolutely.
So you have cultural issues with the people that are currently eating with this food system, which is everybody.
Yeah, the food system here is shocking.
So,
that's cultural compatibility that you're talking about. You're saying that veganism is too culturally incompatible. So is holistic management welcome culturally?
Veganism is absolutely compatible with what I read out here as a context for what most humans want. It's absolutely compatible as long as vegans don't impose their view on others.
So I have a request for everyone. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Ray. So we have a number of people who've been waiting very patiently, very politely for a long time, like over an hour to talk. So I'd like to give them an opportunity in the order in which they raise their hands. And if you have and when it's your turn, if you have a question for either Alan or Silas or anyone else for that matter, please make that question. When they answer your question, you can respond, and then we'll move on to the next person. So the first person in the line who's been waiting the longest is Patricia. Patricia, thank you so much for your patience, and please take it away. And you're currently on mute, Patricia.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Thank you for acknowledgement that I'm patient. Thank you. I just wonder, Alan, I've heard you say a number of times you think that the vegan population is trying to force veganism on people. And I'm real, and I just want to acknowledge you for staying so calm and, you know, just continuing to share I imagine you might feel a little bit under attack. I'm not sure, but I'm hearing that you brought, I also want to acknowledge that in Zimbabwe you helped bring together people of differing factions. That's great, and I hope we can do that here. So, but I'm just curious why you think we vegans want to force our veganism on people, and want to reassure you that it is not in alignment with our nonviolent views. But I want to understand better why you say that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. You know, at the end of the day, all of us are not judged by our words, we're judged by our actions. So I'm just judging vegans by the actions of me. I get some shocking abuse, filthy language. I don't like to use filthy language. I get filthy language. I get filthy abuse. Other people get it from vegans, and nobody's trying to abuse them the same way. The Cowspiracy film was, if you look at that, was so good in some ways, condemning factory production of animals. But do you see how it wrote me off without even an interview or anything? Just saying, this man that killed all these elephants, how can we believe him as an ecologist? You know, I got an award from one organization for integrity in science. So they said it's so rare for a man to publicly admit such a terrible mistake and to do it openly and publicly. And I got almost nothing but abuse from vegans. So I'm just judging people by their behavior. They're trying to force the behavior on others. And we're having it some extent in this discussion. It's absolutely all right to be vegan for spiritual or environment or health reasons. It's not doing the environment any good. It's doing damage to the environment. And I've explained that patiently and over. And the science and everything is solid behind that. The evidence is solidly behind that. You folks can come and visit anytime. You can come to our place in Africa, by the Victoria Falls, and you'll see wonderful people and animals we care for. I live amongst the animals. I don't even like to live in a house. I live in grass huts and mud huts with lions and elephants right around me.
Hey, you know,
I love animals.
I just want.
I get abused as an animal hater and wants to kill animals. No, I want to save humans and all animals by stopping this ridiculous stuff we've done.
Yeah, and I want to tell you, I'm really glad to hear your heart. You know, I mean, we can, no matter, even if you were here telling us that you thought factory farms were okay, it's not, for me, it would not ever be okay to say, and an increasing number of vegans, it's not okay to attack people for their beliefs. No, and so I can't really apologize on the behalf of all vegans, but I would say I would never do that. And I'm finding, and I just hope you know that a lot of us here are really working to become vegans who are understanding of people who are not, because we don't really know why is it that some of us just can do it and believe this, others can't. And so I'll just conclude by saying I just appreciate you, and I'm sorry about what happened. I never knew you apologized about the elephants, and that really touches my heart.
At the TED Talk. If you look at this TED under Savory, you can look at the TED Talk,
Yeah.
and you'll see it.
That's just a sign of character when you can apologize.
I've got a phone ringing, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you.
Hang on, sorry, I'm on a call. I was just stopping that. No need to apologize. I've learned to, Ignaz Semmelweis, the man who discovered bacteria before we knew they existed, and he discovered that if he washed his hands after leaving the maternity ward, cutting up corpses before he went to the maternity wards, he saved hundreds of women's lives. Well, the experts, the expert opinion, the opinions of the day, because this is how humans have always behaved when there's paradigm shifting knowledge, they so persecuted him that he died in a mental home. And I've jokingly said, thank God I was insane 60 years ago, so it saved me from being in a mental home. So no need to apologize. I've been under constant attack. I was the most unpopular man in my country, into exile because I opposed racism, opposed tribalism. I fought 20 years of damned war, trying to solve these problems, because poor land means poor people, social upheaval. So I come at this problem not just as an independent scientist, but as a former president of a political party, having to be responsible for a whole country and its policies, as a soldier who fought 20 years of guerrilla war over these issues of land. I'm not an armchair ecologist. And I then had my own ranches, my own farms, my own game ranches. I was an international consultant. So yes, my view is different from others because I've worked on this one problem for literally over 60 years, trying to find a solution. And I don't have anything in mind except solve the problem. So if Silas or one of you can come up with a better solution tomorrow, I promise you I'll accept it. I'll promote it. If one of you can produce a single scientific paper that shows where anything I'm saying to you is wrong, I will promote it.
There are plenty of those scientific papers,
with hundreds of papers that don't attack my work.
Yeah. You spoke about Cowspiracy. In Cowspiracy, we tried to portray the science as it was at that time. And we actually had to go through a scientific check every time a new executive producer came along. So we stand by that work. It's pretty sound still.
Well, I don't think we want to digress on that, but if you'd like to discuss it with me, I would disagree, because the people who filmed it, as I told you yesterday, I was actually in the audience when they showed the first version. I spoke up and said, I am the man you condemn in this. And then they did agree to meet with me the next day with others present who came from Albuquerque. And they did accept that they'd never tried to interview me, that when we explained what was happening, etc., and how right they were in all their condemnation of commercial factory production, but how wrong they were when it came to rangelands. We were right close to the Aldo Leopold forest, a forest in America on riparian area that's turning to desert. Okay, we were right next to that. And they accepted they're wrong. And I said, what are you going to do about it? They said, we're too far gone. We're going ahead and releasing the film. I said, but you now know it's dishonest. They went ahead.
I don't know so go ahead, Jamin.
Oh, no, you go ahead, Silas.
No, I was going to say, I don't know the exact circumstances. I haven't spoken to Kip and Keegan about exactly what happened in New Mexico, but the review with Leonardo DiCaprio's team happened after that, and we stand by it.
Yeah, DiCaprio's, he wouldn't be competent to review all the science in that.
All righty. Going in the queue of who raised their hand next. Now, Anne, you had your hand up a while back. I don't know if are you good to go with your previous comments?
I'm good to go with my previous. This is, yeah, I'm done. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Anne. Miles, you've been waiting very patiently. You're a gentleman, and thank you for being a gentleman and being so patient. Take it away, Miles.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name's Miles, and I'm up in Canada. And I actually have to say that I purposefully stay away from saying I'm a member of anything. There's a number of reasons. And, one is, for example, the United States is really a pretty scary place to me. Julian Assange, for example, he's a news person, but apparently the freedom of speech doesn't apply to foreigners. So I'm a foreigner, and I do like to come down to the United States to visit. So that's why I say I'm not a member of anything. I'm just here socially. The point that you make about the oxidization of grassland in the more dry climates, you're saying that when the animals are tromping around and pooping and peeing, that poop and pee doesn't oxidize as much as the grass would if it was just left to keep growing?
Yeah, let me explain it to you. In the perennially humid areas, we've got a new term for it that came out about 40 years ago. We call them non-brittle. So if you look at the east and west coast here, much of Canada, if you go and pick little twigs that are dead and at the end of the year or any time in the year, or dead grass at any time of the year, and crumple it in your hand, it'll just softly crumple up. It's non-brittle. All right, now if you go to other areas, like New Mexico or some parts of Canada, much of the world, about 2/3 of the world, most of the world, where the humidity is erratic, and it can be high rainfall, but for 4 or 5 months. So it can be, 1,000 millimeters of rain, but then you get 6 months of no rain. Or it can be low rainfall, 100 or 50 millimeters. Or like us, where I live in Zimbabwe, we could get about 600 millimeters of rain over 4 months, and then we've got about 8 months of dry. Okay, so you go in those areas, and you pick a dead twig off a tree or a weed, a dead grass, and you crumple it in your hand, and it's brittle. It breaks into little pieces. A brittle environment. So it tends to be those environments. If you hear, I'm looking out onto the mangrove swamps here, and I can see lichen growing on the trees. That tells me there's a lot of humid. This is a non-brittle environment. There's no oxidation taking place out here. Okay, because the vegetation that dies breaks down with enough moisture supporting microorganisms that break it down biologically. Now, when you go to the other type of environment where the rain is high or low, some of them will be forested, some aren't. It depends on how high the rain that governs that. And then when you go to those, when there are dead twigs, dead leaves, dead grass, etc., all right, the period of the dry period of the year, the microorganism populations die off. And then this dead material in sunlight starts to chemically break down, and it turns to a gray and then a darker black color. And you can see grass plants literally 40 years later, they've just been dead and they still haven't broken down. They're just a dead black clump of dead grass. So in some of the research plots on the California border, as I've seen in this country. Okay, so those we call the brittle environments, and that's where desertification tends to occur. And unfortunately, it's most of the world's land. So that is what I was explaining there. Does that help?
Yeah. So another question is, I like your holistic idea, because I believe it's definitely a huge step in the right direction. I say I'm not vegan, but I say I live the vegan ethic. And that's just because take on an identity, to me, is really pushing it. But personally now, since meeting Dr. Rao, if somebody puts fried chicken in front of me and an avocado, I will definitely go for the avocado.
Yeah, I wouldn't eat that fried chicken either.
Sorry?
I wouldn't eat that fried chicken either, because it's probably factory produced, and I don't eat them.
Right. So this is why I say I believe I like your holistic idea, because it's a huge step in the right direction, because both you and Salish are in agreement about compassion. I love the context you read. I would, however, suggest include truth and transparency. The word ethics is in there, so you kind of have it covered, but truth and transparency, I think, needs to be up front and center in all of this, because we need to be able to go after the industrial slaughter plants that are abusing animals, and the industrial dairy operations, and all dairy is mean. So it's not compassionate. And there's so many of these states and some provinces like Ontario coming up with these gag laws to prevent people from, it should be transparent. Anybody should be able to. What do they have to hide? Why are they hiding it? Obviously, there's horrible things going on in there. And I'll conclude by saying, I like your holistic approach, because I did watch a little video clip the other day, and it showed people who live in the Yukon, and they're having a caribou dinner, but they eat everything. The indigenous people there, it showed them even the heads were being cooked, so they're going to eat everything. And so that's holistic eating, in my opinion. I'm not ever going to tell people in the far north that they're going to have to starve, but we did come in here, the settlers. We wiped out tens of millions of buffalo. Yes, maybe in California, and there were extinctions before that, but I'll tell you, I learned from Professor Leroy Littlebear to always think of all our relations. So when I say grace at dinner time, and my Christianity is I'm not a Christian, but I do say grace. Christianity's given love a bad name, in my opinion, but that's all other digression. But I do say, thank you for these blessings and all our relations. And to me, that's holistic. And I don't think, people really have to ask themselves, if you're not actually going out there and ceremonially capturing your animal, and you're ceremonially eating that animal, we don't have any right to be buying from Costco, big pork loins and burger, which now they're saying there's a lot of fecal contamination in burger. So just think about that, everybody. Anyway, rambling, but thank you very much. I do see there is a coming together here, and I don't think the vegans, I'm not saying don't take that as an identity. If you're really committed, as Alan Savory has said, go for it, be a vegan. But we cannot impose the total veganism as an ideology on everybody. Thank you.
I also think, though, that it's false to imply that it's an ethical and humane consideration for all of life to kill animals. That in itself is a fundamental flaw that we've all been forced to agree to as a context for this discussion. That I fundamentally disagree with. That's a lie. That is not the truth. The truth is, if we have an ethical and humane consideration for all of life on Earth, then the discussion of killing animals as an ethical act is unreal. It's untenable. And also, we're missing out on
it's survival for these people. And we can't just bulldoze over them and impose our colonialism
I'm
on
not
them.
arguing with that. They're going to have to get there. When they get there, when we eventually can get supplies to them where they don't have to do that, we do have technology that is capable of doing that and is already doing it now in the developed countries. Eventually that can reach out to the undeveloped countries. So take it one step at a time. I'm saying to agree with a fundamentally flawed context in the first place that we're all asked to agree with as vegans, and we're fundamentally in disagreement with that because we don't practice that. We practice the actual, what that actually means. Somebody who's killing animals to live is not practicing that. They should have a different one that says ethical and humane consideration as long as it satisfies our desire to kill animals if we live so remotely that that's the only choice we have. There should be exceptions in that. It's not complete, it's not honest, it's not all the way transparent. So I have to point that out.
Can I point out, I respect your view there. First, just to the gentleman before you from California, I accept the piece you said about behavior not being in this context. This is just a generic one I use. If you read my textbook, the third part in a context is, I referred earlier, there are many people who are affected by your decisions or affect them. You can't change them. I can't push you with a piece of string. You can't change anyone else. So what we do is we describe our own behavior and how you will have to be, because you're judged by your behavior, for people to be supportive of the context you're living your life in. So it is actually there if you're reading the textbook. So thank you for that point. The gentleman who's completely against killing, now let's agree with you for a moment and say we don't kill. All right, so we're going to have to use millions of animals to save civilization and veganism, because we can't reverse desertification and thus address climate change without the animals, right? So we've got that far. Now, let's assume we don't kill the animals. Now, if we don't kill them, we're going to have some problems to deal with. An enormous economic problem of feeding millions of people who can only eat animals, not just in the north. All over North Africa, Australia, in the United States, there are parts of the land that can't produce crops. So we're going to have a problem there. Now we're going to have another problem, because if we don't humanely kill animals at X number of years, whatever, and end their lives to feed, and we just let them go on, and we stop all killing, now what's going to happen is we're going to decrease animal populations because poaching is going to increase, because hunting increases animal populations and poaching decreases them. So when Kenya put a complete ban on killing, the wildlife population decreased by 60% because people turned to poaching. And most people don't understand that poaching does that, and people turn to poaching to feed themselves if they can't legally feed themselves. So that would be another problem we would have to deal with. Now there's another problem to deal with. If we stop all killing like that, any humane killing, all animals die. Now when they die through accident, predation, or disease. And these are not nice deaths generally at all. They sometimes die of starvation. That's rare. I have witnessed that, where I was branded as a terrible person by vegans and others because I wanted to humanely start killing animals and managing the populations, and I was totally blocked and I was vilified all over my country for doing that. One woman who I noticed was following me from public meeting to public meeting and vilifying me, I went up to her and I said, look, I noticed you're following me. I believe you care for animals like vegans do. Will you please come with me into the field? Because many vegans have never been in the field. She agreed to come into the field with me. I took her to the Thule Circle. That's a big area on the Botswana-Rhodesia border. And I did not take a rifle. When we got there, there was a herd of impala staggering and dying, a whole herd. And I parked my Land Rover and I said, now what do we do? Shall we just watch them? Or would you agree that I should humanely kill them. After a while, she agreed we should humanely kill them. So I only had a pick handle, and I had to kill them with a pick handle because I hadn't taken a rifle because I didn't want to offend her. Now, after that, and a bit of realism, that realizing that animals die and that nature can be terribly cruel, she then went around the country and we got game management introduced and started to try and do something. 50,000 animals died. A cruel, terrible death. I had to watch that.
Can I respond here, Alan, to what you're telling me?
It's not as simple as just saying we will stop killing.
Right. Okay, I understand your point. I understand your point.
Left now.
Got your point.
And it will result in enormous disease and suffering.
Right. I got your point. So here's the thing that I feel is missing in this whole argument, that if we just go ahead and do as you say, and let's just say that in some miracle of a way, it actually does what you think it's going to do, because this is all your assumption. And so let's say that happens. But now humanity is just the same humanity. It hasn't transformed at all. It hasn't grown. It hasn't changed. It still eats meat. It still eats violence. It still absorbs that into its chemistry. It's the root cause of all war, because you eat violence, you do violence. There's no way you cannot do what's in your chemistry. What's in your chemistry is what's going to motivate your actions through your bloodstream and your behavior, your nervous system, and everything. It conditions your very experience of being human. So, okay, so what we've got now is humanity, the same as it was that got us into the mess in the first place. So I feel it misses the point of what Silas Rao is talking about in his 7 points in the Climate Healers website. So we need a total transformation of humanity in order to carry out the vegan ideal we want. If there's no transformation in humanity, I quite frankly don't see the humanity that we have is worth carrying on, because it's just a terrible mess. And eating meat is a major part of it, because you eat violence, you do violence. That's the root cause of all wars. And meat is carcinogenic, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but it's also carcinogenic. It's extremely violent to our chemistry. And maybe humanity has evolved since 40,000 years ago, when maybe we needed to eat meat because we were so remote and distant and we didn't know anything about our agriculture yet before it was developed. Okay, and I'm not talking about remote cultures. I'm going to have to do what they do. They're not the problem anyway. They're in harmony with life and nature, and they're almost just like the animals themselves. No issue there. It's the rest of us living here in civilization, and what we're doing, even if we start doing it humanely, we're still leading violence. We're still dumbing down our consciousness. There's a whole aspect that you haven't even talked about. Maybe you don't even believe in it. Maybe you don't even think it's true. Maybe you're a tried and true. I'm not just going to assume what you are. I'm not saying what you are. But maybe you're just a tried and true scientist, like some tried and true scientists I know who don't believe in any of that stuff and just call it, well, that's your spiritual belief. Good for you. You know? But it's really deeper than that, and there's more to it than that. It's all about motivation, where your motivation comes from, how you act on your motivation, how you carry out your actions, how it has an effect on you, and the implications for everybody around you. And if you're a public figure, how that has an impact on the way everybody else sees how life should be.
Yeah, I don't share your pessimism. Let's leave it at that.
And that's a judgment. That's your projection, pal. That's not pessimism. That's realism.
Well,
that's realism. I'm sorry, disagree. That's realism, not pessimism. That's your judgment. You keep your judgment to yourself.
Put it this way. Sorry, I put it this way. I've fought in a long war, fought and killed people, and seen how we could get together. And we could. And I've met with guerrilla leaders, and I met with the opposing armies, generals. We had 3 armies and 4 political parties in a long, bitter civil war. And I was able to meet with my opponents, and we honored each other, we respected each other, we worked together to bring the war to an end. People can do that.
I think that's beautiful. You're a hero there. I mean, you're an absolute hero in that sense. I agree with you. Beautiful.
As I said earlier, when we had 2 political parties killing each other and got them just to agree to a context that we could all agree on, the whole atmosphere changed. I had people, I mentioned this, I think, yesterday, in La Creek Refuge long ago. The officials asked me to help them with a refuge there. And I said, I will just get people together and I'll come. And when I went there, okay, the people were only men. There were no women, no children. When I asked the bureaucrats I was with, where are the women and children in this community? They said they've stayed at home. It's going to be violent. It could easily be violent. This was in the period in America leading up to the Oklahoma bombing, when there was so much violence. All right, so only men had come to the meeting. When I started to talk to those men, I wanted to talk to them about managing holistically. If I had mentioned love and caring, they would have just ridiculed me. They were already ridiculing me. They used filthy language. They told me to fuck off back to Africa, that I knew nothing about their society. They said it's impossible to have agreement in this community. And I said, right, gentlemen, time out. Let's cancel this meeting. They applauded. And I said, now, one more thing. Will you agree to just stay for an hour and prove me wrong? Instead of telling me I'm wrong, they did. They agreed to. I just gave each man a piece of paper, because if I'd asked them about caring, love, families, they would have ridiculed me more. They were typical of many, I regret, American men with big belt buckles, big boots, big hats, macho bullshit. Okay, they would have ridiculed the hell out of me. So I just gave them each a piece of paper and said, be totally selfish. Think of nobody but yourself. Now I want you to write on this bit of paper what you would like to see in this community if you could come back 100 years from now. You're all going to die shortly, so please do that. So they wrote selfishly what they'd like to see on that paper. When we put that paper together, the whole atmosphere changed. Everybody wanted the same thing. We ended the meeting in harmony with a holistic context.
Yes, I remember hearing you say that yesterday. It was a very beautiful story. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Heal these things.
Yeah, and I totally agree with it. And don't get me wrong, I totally support where you're coming from, because you support totally where you're coming from, and I support anybody who does that. I'm just saying the fundamental, and another fundamental point I see as a flaw in what you're presenting, according to me, is that you're saying it's a management problem. I'm saying it's a consciousness problem. So on that note, we fundamentally disagree also, and I'm okay with that. Consciousness, the level of consciousness in dealing with the problem is the problem, not just management. Because you can have management and carry on forever and save all of humanity and nothing changes. That's not really the humanity I want to be a part of.
Okay, so assume you're right. Assume you're right and it's a consciousness problem. Let's assume that for a moment. So if I take the one of the big national parks near where I live, all right? Now, everybody's consciousness, I don't know anybody who doesn't want that to be the ideal of a national park. I don't know a single soul that doesn't want to see high biodiversity, beautiful trees along the river, beautiful grasslands and vegetation and animals. Okay, so there isn't a consciousness problem. But right now, the riverbanks are bare and eroding, the banks are clamping into the river, animals are dying, starvation, whole reed beds have disappeared, bird species have disappeared, bushbuck have disappeared, species are dying, it's contributing to climate change. How would it help to change the consciousness there?
How would it help to change the consciousness about anything everybody does anywhere on the planet? When you change your consciousness, I can't predict that, because consciousness, when it changes, it evolves beyond where it's at now. You can't predict that, because that's an unknown. That's an unknown because you're evolving it to a greater capacity than it has now. You can't guess that. Otherwise, you're subtly manipulating it and thinking you're changing it, when all you're doing is mentally maybe creating a new ideology that you call expanding or growing your consciousness. So that's a simple question to answer. You can only do that by doing it. That's where the 7 steps of the climate healers comes in. Many of those things are going into the unknown, because we have to change. We have to go beyond our present limitations, our present mindsets, and our present ways of you have an incredibly brilliant solution, but I don't see a transformation of consciousness. I just see, okay, it's a management problem, so let's just take and do it this way, and hopefully we'll all survive better in terms of, you know, dealing with the environment and everything that you've studied so carefully and understand so much about. There's more to it than that. That to me is just a limited focus on the whole thing. And you could say so many more facts about it, but it's not dealing with or addressing the fact that we have to transform fundamentally as a consciousness, and the level of consciousness we're at, and our ability to use our consciousness to deal with the life we live in. And we're not doing that. And I only see that possible. I'm not saying it's even possible, but I'm saying there is the chance for it to come out through the 7 core concepts of the climate healers thing, because that opens to many areas where you become vulnerable to new new experimentations, to changing many different facets that enter into this discussion, not just the facet of environment. That's just one facet. There's other facets. There's so much more to it. And also just the scientific data behind it all that backs it from somebody who's actually studied it and looked at it and knows what he's talking about when it comes to all these things. It's overwhelming. And I'd be open to whatever, if you've got that much kind of scientific data backing everything you're saying and that you can prove all these points so well, I'd be open to that. Whatever you got.
Yeah, for your interest, I sent Damon a 1-minute video. I don't know, can you show that 1 minute?
Good.
That 1 minute video, I sent him one for your interest in those national parks. Without having to change consciousness, we can begin to turn that round. And I sent a 1 minute video to Damon showing that.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. The sound may not work too well.
There's a way.
I can explain it.
Okay, very good, very good. So I'll play it with no sound, and just bear with me so that I can find it.
Okay, as you're finding it, I'll explain to the others what this is. We put a drone up, some people that were doing an independent documentary film, and we put it 15 seconds over one national park, 15 seconds over another, 15 seconds over the community land where all the people around the parks live and ourselves. We're adjacent, we're right in the same area. And then we put it 15 seconds over our land. And you'll see, this is after 17 years of drought, bad years, poorer than average. It's 17 years since I've seen mushrooms, our national flower, growing. And you'll see the contrast. Okay, so when this...
Oh, did that screw up? Here, I'll stop sharing. Okay, we're just about there in terms of the share. Just bear with us.
As I said, you're about as computer challenged as I am.
So that one, share computer audio, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, let me go to...
Essentially what you're going to see is when the ground is bare, everything is dying. That's contributing to climate change, poverty, violence, everything, and you're going to see the amount of contrast.
Okay. All right, let's give this a go. Here goes.
Okay, so we're over Zambezi National Park. You can see the riverbanks bare. You can see the tremendous amount of bare ground. This is the end of the rains. The land is not going to get any better than this. Now you're over communal land. And now you're over Chobe National Park. The only green you're seeing is trees that the elephants don't eat and the other game don't eat. Otherwise, everything green is virtually unpalatable. Now you're over land in the same area, same animals, managed holistically. And that's after 17 bad years. This is just mind-boggling what this means for the world. The economic significance of this, the political significance, the military significance, everything is just mind-blowing. And you can show it in 1 minute. And we didn't change the consciousness there, we just changed the management.
What a powerful conversation, and I really thank everyone. We've got some other people who've been waiting a long time to talk. I want to read Melissa's comment. She's the one who tried to talk earlier. I have a question about how do we come together as a collective to co-create solutions, even though we are all coming from different perspectives and backgrounds. We heard a very good discussion about cooling the planet, which will help bring back waters. I am not hearing anyone talk about wildlife and restoring natural habitats and giving land back to Mother Earth instead of to humans. She goes on to ask, how can the vegan movement join regenerative land restoration idea and vice versa? Silas, Alan, I'll let you both respond to that.
Well, they can, and there are vegans, I'm sure, that'll be joining the regenerative agriculture movement, but regenerative agriculture, it will not be regenerative unless management is holistic. So we know that, and we're very aware of that. Remember that all organic, sustainable, every way of agriculture that we had in the world, that the plants and animals that made civilization possible, that were domesticated, was done thousands of years ago by people, and that with all these forms of agriculture in all regions of the world, we were unable to maintain civilization, which is city-based by definition. I mentioned earlier, only Lower Egypt have we been able to do so for a long time. Farmers destroy civilizations, armies change them, but they continue in changed form. So we know that historically, and so to have regenerative agriculture now, it cannot be just organic, sustainable, permaculture, any of these things. It has to be a new agriculture addressing complexity, and we'll do it. We've got the knowledge. There's so many good people working in all these fields, permaculture, organic, sustainable, and we're all beginning to pull together under this title of regenerative agriculture. But to be regenerative agriculture, remember we said land cannot be managed. It's so tied to the culture, the economy. And I love the term regenerative. The first person to express that I heard was Robert Rodale in this country. And Robert, many years ago, came to stay with me, and he talked about the need for regenerative agriculture that would regenerate communities, biological communities, economies, towns, etc. So I love it, and I hope the permaculture people will join that movement, but I don't want to go back over all our discussion. It cannot be done if they try to impose their views on other societies, other groups.
Yeah, I agree with Melissa that we can do we can start restoring habitats for animals. We need to bring back the animals. So I use the analogy, of the Y2K problem in the year 2000. And people say, well, the Y2K problem was not such a big problem, right? So why are you now focusing on 2026 as a major problem, that we are going to kill all the wild animals? Well, we are on track to kill them off at the current rate of killing. So it's as if in 1994, during the Y2K problem, you discover that 90% of the computers have all died because of the Y2K problem. And you haven't even started addressing the software problem underlying it. Wouldn't you then at that point say we need to solve it right now and put all our efforts into making it happen? We are exactly in the same situation when it comes to wildlife today. We haven't yet addressed it, and animals are dying so fast, and we now have to restore their habitats, bring back their populations, bring back the wild animal populations, and also recognize that it's not holistic to be eating animals today. It is not holistic. There is so much toxins out there in the environment, and their populations are so far down that if we continue to consume animals, it's detrimental to our own health and to the health of the animals. It is not a holistic practice. So that being the case, veganic permaculture is now doing very well. A lot of people are working on it, and there are tremendous examples all over the world of veganic permaculture succeeding. And that is about growing food for us along with wild animals, in conjunction with wild animals and birds and insects. So thank you, Melissa, for that question.
Beautiful. All right. Next in the queue, we have Jorge, followed by James Madison, followed by Ray, followed by Forrest, followed by Dharmendra. Jorge.
Can I call for a potty break?
Absolutely. How many minutes? How many minutes, folks?
And also, you told me 2 hours, and with 2.5 hours, my bladder is very small, and I've got guests arriving for dinner. So I'm going to have to cut off after these a few questions. Can you give me a potty break?
Yeah. How many minutes would you like for a potty break?
Potty break for 4 minutes. 3.5.
4 minutes. All right, everybody. We'll be back in 4.
next few questions because I've told them they want 2 hours and they've got 2.5. So we're trying to finish off. Then get impatient. I guess we can't talk
I just
without.
want to say I'm ready to go on, but I'm just waiting for the green light.
Maybe we can start without him. Do we need him?
We need everyone to stay with.
Where are you? Where are you?
I am from Mexico City, calling from Mexico City at the moment.
Okay.
All right. Take it away, Jorge.
Yeah, we started without you.
Sorry, I missed that. We were talking on top of each other. Okay, I will go. So, first of all, I want to bring back something that was said at the beginning of today, that it is amazing that we are sitting down talking amongst each other. You know, like I never saw this happening for real. And now we're here. And that is a blessing for me. I hope for everyone else also, because like I couldn't see this happening. And Jamin and the willingness of Mr. Savory and Dr. Rao, I really feel so much appreciation for you guys for doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And everybody else here, thank you for just like trying to hold the space for the highest future possibility of these conversations. And okay, so I want to bring back the attention to the title of this part of the block party, which I understand is redefining our relationship with the animal kingdom. I think that we need to redefine many other relations, but talking about this one, I consider myself part of the animal kingdom, so I need to understand better this relation with myself as part of the animal kingdom. And I would like to take this opportunity to ask both of you, Dr. Rao and Mr. Savory, how would you do this? Like, I'm gonna paste it in the chat box so it's more clear, because I know that I have a strange accent for most of the people in the world when I speak English. So I will put it in the chat box if that's all right for everybody. And it is basically talking about this aspect of sharing the planet with so many animals in the animal kingdom and beyond that kingdom, right? But just to focus about the animal kingdom, I would like to know how would Mr. Savory and the Savory Institute and the holistic management would honor the aim to give policy recommendations to support a biodiversity-based agriculture that doesn't displace, fence out, or exterminate wild carnivore mammals. And the same thing would apply, the same question, exactly the same to Dr. Rao. Both coming from your own mindset. How would you share this land with our fellow animals, no matter if they're to eat, to wear, to appreciate, to hold their beauty, to take them as our own? Like, how would you do this? Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sarge, you go first.
speak.
It's kind of we have something called eco-governance that we've been working on. Eco-governance, in which we look at the interests of every part of biodiversity, and we assign committees that have to speak up for that part of the biodiversity, so that every aspect of biodiversity is represented in the decision-making process. So this is, think of it as sociocracy with taking into account the interests of every element of the ecosystem, whether it's plants or insects or animals, wild animals, all of them have to be taken into account when we make decisions in the future. So that's what I propose, and that's what we are working on in the Vegan World 2026 project. It's part of our foundation of the Codes for a Healthy Earth. And so that's how I would honor that, to give them, because right now you're right, we say that these are our animals, and therefore we need to protect our animals from those pests. And we call in helicopters to come and shoot them, because they had the temerity to come and eat our animals, right? So that's the kind of management that's going on now, which is absolutely that cannot continue without destroying biodiversity, which is really what it's doing right now.
Are you finished?
Okay.
Yeah. George, thanks for your question. You see, when you looked at that national parks, etc., the whole aim is to restore biodiversity, and there's nothing that we can blame there. And that's what I've been trying to discuss with vegans. There's nothing in which vegans are offering us that will ever restore that biodiversity. So that's what I was trying to show you. And with that 1-minute video, by just changing the management we did. Now on that grass, Divangombe, that's a ranch I donated for the benefit of the people in the country, and the 5 chiefs are trustees with me and my wife, and we run it as a non-profit. It's one of 50 hubs like that around the world now, modeled on it. Now, in that land that you saw, we produced that result on the ground by increasing the cattle 400%. There was no other way to do it. We increased the cattle by 400%. When we began, we had no elephants, no buffalo. They were fenced off by a veterinary fence. We've now got 500 cattle as a tool to preserve and produce the wildlife and human habitat. And we can have anywhere up to 600 elephants some days, anywhere up to 300 to 500 buffalo some days on the place. According to the national parks researchers, we have a higher density of lions than they have in the national park now. Just probably obvious because we got the food and so on. Now, all of this we do in a predator-friendly manner. So we have lions, leopards, hyenas, cheetahs, wild dogs. We don't just have wolves and coyotes, we have the whole damn lot. And we have killed 2 lions in the last 30 years, and they were killed by a manager with just inexperience. Had he been more experienced, that wouldn't have happened. It was a silly accident. We hardly lose any animals, and now people all around us are beginning to copy that and to run their animals in a predator-free manner. When we begin changing policies, and ranchers in America are managing holistically, as eventually will happen, ranchers will not be shooting wolves, they'll be wanting wolves. The same way as we want our lions. So I don't know how better to say to you, we're already doing it. That's what I'm talking to you about.
Okay, thank you both for your answers. I have a follow-up question to Mr. Savory about this video. You're saying that there's a convivial element between predators and animal grazers that helps into the regeneration or makes it possible. Like these grazers are allowed to be eaten? They have like a commercial purpose, or they're just like workers that could be eaten by a lion or two or another carnivore? Like, what is the relation? Is there electrical fencing? Like, how do you keep the carnivores from exterminating all the?
You can look at it on websites, and you can look on my blog, my website, others, and you can get a lot of information. What we do is we've perfected a lion-proof crawl where the 500 cattle come into at night. So if you picture it, we've got this portable, easily put up and raised down curtain of boma sheeting, it's called. It was developed for wildlife capture. We use that. It lasts for over 10 years in sunlight. So every week this is moving. There is no fencing for millions of acres. Fencing is very destructive to wildlife, and it wouldn't pass the checking to see if it was in this context. Everything is checked to be in this context, so no fencing. And the animals are brought in at night. They're counted in, checked their health, everything. They're counted out at dawn, check their health. So twice a day, every animal is checked. They're handled with what we call low stress animal handling. When they come to us, many of them belong to the community. All bells are taken off them, stress, noise. Herders are not allowed to use sticks, not allowed to shout at animals, not allowed to throw stones at an animal, not allowed to do anything except what we call low stress handling, which was developed by an American who developed that technique of just body position and the animals reading it and so on. So we're now training people and pastoralists all over how to do that. And then during the day, they go out and they are on their job of regenerating the habitat using their hooves, their dung, the urine, etc. They go all over the ranch producing that result. And as a consequence, now we've got all this wildlife, etc. And now, despite, as I said, this being our 17th bad year, last year being the driest we've had on memory, despite that, we're now desperately trying to find the money to go up to 1,000 head of cattle. We're battling now to keep pace with the production of the land, the exact opposite of what everybody in the world believes. It's there, you can come any day, you can stay there, you can see it.
Thank you so much. Like, I feel as a vegan, wearing the vegan shirt, that this approach that you're using can be replicated in a vegan sanctuary, in a permaculture design. Like, thanks for your work, because we can replicate that. The only difference is that we wouldn't eat the grazers. Thank you for this work. It is very valuable. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Savory. Thank you, Dr. Rao, and thank you, everybody.
And good luck with it. We'll help you because we provide trainers and everything. We'll help you with the holistic management. And there are many permaculture people who take holistic management training and realize that management has to be holistic. Otherwise, we're not going to sustain ourselves. So there'll be a lot of help if you want to do that. And as I said earlier, no problem as long as people do it in their own area and context and don't impose. It's when we impose our views on others, we end up killing each other.
Wow. All righty. Next in the queue, we've got James Madison, followed by Ray, followed by Forrest. You've all been super patient, and I thank you for that. James, if you're ready, please take it away. And by the way, Alan, I'm not trying to hold you here longer than you promised. We're now 45 minutes longer than what we talked about.
Let's handle these three, and then I'm going to escape because I've got a guest waiting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, James, are you ready? James Madison. Okay, he may have stepped away. Ray, are you ready?
Hi, Alan.
Hi, Ray.
I work with Sailesh. I manage his base camp, which is called Vegan World 2026. And the concept here isn't to force veganism onto people. It's to engage them with the logic behind it and seek to shift the culture so that what we mean by a vegan world is half of the cities, the urban centers in developed nations self-identify as vegans. So it's a choice, a voluntary shift of culture. Is this compatible with your view of how we need to change our systems? Because that was my favorite part, was when you said we need a new system. And most people are happy with the system which just isn't sustainable.
Yeah, we don't need a system. All systems fail by definition. All right, nature and humans and organizations are complex. Only process works. We have to replace system with process. That's why educational systems keep changing. That's why economic systems keep failing and changing. It doesn't matter what you look at. Grazing systems all fail by definition. So we went through a lot of that when I was working with those 2,000 scientists, trying to fine-tune the holistic framework. So the holistic framework and that process of managing holistically, yes, it fit with anybody doing that, as long as they believe that for their health, their spiritual beliefs, and don't impose it on others. So it's okay for them to do that. Where it's coming wrong is, and we talked about it earlier, is I'm afraid vegans are very aggressive. You don't know how much abuse people like me get from vegans.
That's a generalization. I don't tar everyone with the same brush.
No, I didn't say you. I said you have no idea how much I get from
I
them.
get abuses too, but that doesn't mean I'm going to say everyone on that side is abusive. It's not the way, so there are people have, we are diverse in our views. Some people come at it with a lot of baggage, so this is,
I didn't say
some are
everyone.
passionate.
I said earlier, a vegan friend helped me produce the blog I put on my blog page. And I said, I get an awful lot of abuse from vegans. Many vegans, you need to look at your own group, are very abusive.
Well, we're not a small cult with a very defined set of beliefs. We're talking about a worldwide movement, and that's every kind of culture, just one that decides that it's their obligation to eat low on the food web. So it's I think it definitely was more true in the past when the animal rights movement was very small and very generally saying the same thing. But now there wasn't an environmental movement of veganism, and they're looking for solutions. So that's why I'm curious of how we, like you say, the systems break. And we see lots of signs that this kind of system where we're feeding animals food is insanity and is unsustainable and isn't part of our future. I judge the people that believe that this is okay, that we're going to continue to do this. There is a certain amount of judging that's required. People that don't care about the future are,
we're all trying to stop it.
People who are going to inherit the planet.
We're all trying to stop that. That's why I said no problem with that part of the Cowspiracy film. Where it went wrong was to condemn people like me and pastoralists and ranchers, or millions of people around the world who love their animals, care for their animals, end their lives humanely, have no other way to sustain their families.
So you hold the ones that don't comply with that, they're within your judgment. You judge those people.
The ones who we're all against is factory production. I want to cry when I see animals in a zoo. I don't go to zoos. I find myself crying.
Mm-hmm.
I can't bear to eat bloody chickens when I see how cruelly they're produced, shoveled into cages and things. That's what you need to be fighting, not pastoralists and ranchers and farmers who are the backbone of feeding millions of people. More, actually, small farmers are feeding more people than big agriculture is. But they're getting caught in your crossfire. You're not distinguishing.
So you don't see beef as an elite product that's eaten by generally the rich people of the world, and the Lancet diet has drawn attention that some people can't even afford the extremely low impact diet because they can't afford that much meat.
Correct, and beef shouldn't be the price it is. We're producing it in factories with subsidies, and the taxpayers is paying all the ecological costs of that. That's what you need to be fighting. The management that produces stupidity, institutional stupidity, cruelty, violence to animals, but you're condoning the management and you're ending up vilifying the people who are doing the right thing.
So you would help us redirect those subsidies towards sustainable solutions that have a future.
Yeah, I tried to spell this out when I gave a keynote talk at a conference in London about 6 years ago. I was appealing to people we had there who were of like mind to ourselves, wanting organic, sustainable agriculture, etc. And I said, look, we're facing such a crisis in the world that we know, everybody knows, that agriculture needs to be based on the biological sciences. Now, because of institutions which don't behave like a human being, they behave differently from how any human behaves, all right? They'll go against their very mission to protect the institution, like Catholic Church protecting Catholic priests instead of protecting innocent children for hundreds of years. It's not because they're bad, it's because they're human. And humans are complex, and that's a wicked problem in institutions. Ask any American, does it make sense for America to be producing oil, to grow corn, to feed animals and produce fuel? And any American will say that doesn't make sense. Why are we doing it? We're doing it because people like yourselves support that practice. You support the policies. Now, when enough people don't, we can change it. So as I mentioned in that talk in London, I said, look, who do we represent? Those of us that see that agriculture must be based on the biological sciences. If we're lucky, out of the world's billions of people, 9 billion people, we maybe represent 1%. If we're lucky, 2 or 3%. We're losing the war. And I said, no, we pat ourselves on the back, we praise ourselves, but we're preaching to the choir. And we're doing wonderfully well. Savory Institute we've got 50 hubs around the world now. People are changing. Even a university-led hub, as I mentioned. And I said, you know, that's wonderful. But if we keep doing that, and if 30 years from now we represent 10%, the war's over. Civilization's gone.
It must frustrate you that there aren't agricultural.
Yeah, how do we produce rapid change? Because we've got to get beyond just stopping fossil fuels. That's not going to stop climate change. Or desertification. It's going to do nothing for desertification. So how do we get beyond that incremental change? Now, we know from good research, and Salish has probably read this, so Eric Ashby, and looking at Britain and America and how truly new knowledge comes into a democratic society. And he found that if knowledge is truly new, paradigm shifting, like what I'm talking to you about is, it takes up to 200 years. All right, I've been 70 years. And we've got up to 0.001% of the population, or whatever. I support what I'm saying. There's another 130 years at least to go. It's over for the Greta Thunbergs of this world. We've got to find a better way than incremental change. And what you guys are doing, I love the constructive stuff. I love the fact that vegans care enough. Because people have said to me, how do you put up with so much crap all your life? Old governments have tried to crush me. Powerful universities have tried to crush me. You'd be staggered if you knew what the things that are being done to try to silence me. And I've kept going. And I've said I keep going for one reason. I care. enough about animals. Now, when you guys care enough, you'll begin to see that, oh my God, some of my beliefs need to be modified. If I truly care about the future, as I did, I hated livestock. I was on public record as prepared to shoot ranchers. I found I was wrong. I had to go around the whole country and say, you guys, I'm wrong. Same as I had to do with the elephants. All right. So if we're going to get change quickly and save the situation, how can we do it? Again, if we look at the research, it shows that you and I can choose to change the light bulbs, change our diet, whatever. We're fiddling while Rome burns. We're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The ship's sinking. All right. How do we act at scale? The only way we can act at scale is through organizations. There's no other way.
I have to jump in.
Now, the moment we form an organization, it takes on a life of its own, and we have to deal with wicked problems. One of them is that organizations represent the prevailing thinking in their society. So society believes in planting trees. Society believes in technology. So, for example, when a woman in Kenya planted a lot of trees, she got a Nobel Prize for stopping violence. 80% of Kenya, the rainfall's too low. That's where most of the violence is. Okay, but it doesn't matter. Society believes that. When society vilifies livestock and has for over 10,000 years, you can go back in ancient scripts and see them blaming the nomads for causing the desertification. When this is a belief so deep, all right, how do you change it? You don't easily. Institutions ridicule the new thinking. That's why Ignaz Semmelweis died in a mental asylum. What happened to Galileo? Nothing has changed since then. What happened to Harrison, who discovered longitude, how to work it out? He was persecuted. Doesn't matter who you look at, or me. It's not personal. That's why I don't take it personally. It's how organizations function. So if we're aware of that, then we're also aware that the moment there's sufficient shift in public opinion, organizations change.
But does it frustrate you that the IPCC doesn't talk about, they don't have any agricultural solutions?
Sorry?
You have an agricultural solution, but they're not willing to listen to that.
Well, the moment that the public says it makes sense for policies to be developed holistically and no longer reductionist, our institutions will change. And when that changes, you'll bring about what you're wanting. And we can do it without spending 200 years in conflict. And because I don't think if we pick something like that, nobody can fight it. Who can fight for reductionist management of policies? Reductions to continue. It's a holistic worldview that is emerging. And if we can just get vegans and all of us saying it makes sense for our institutions to develop policies holistically, bang, we'll start developing policies around a context like this and we'll solve it. Because most people are good, most people are doing their best, and there's an immense amount of knowledge out in amongst our vegans, our permaculture people, our farmers, our ranchers, our pastoralists. The moment you pull us together around what we all want, better families, more higher biodiversity, more humane world, we all want that. Nobody except insane people fights for their own beliefs to destroy all this for everyone and destroy the world. There are few people that way out in extreme. I dropped my beliefs against livestock because I realized I loved the wildlife, I loved the land more than I hated livestock. So I had to change my beliefs because my love of the wildlife and the land and the people overcame my prejudice.
So as you mentioned, it's the institutions that don't like change. They like to keep the status quo. It's what they know. It's what they've been able to maintain.
They don't like change. They cannot change. I cannot find a single instance where an institution has changed ahead of the public insisting, when new paradigm shifting knowledge is involved. And when Eric Ashby researched that, he concluded that institutions change when the bulk of the people at the school or the fairgrounds or the cricket ground or whatever are saying, when are they going to change? It's then safe and the institution changes. We're getting very close to that. And it just needs more push. It doesn't have to be the whole population. It just needs enough people for it to make sense that we should develop policies in a national, holistic context that everybody agrees to.
Well, the environmental community rejects both of us. They think that all the solutions rely in fossil fuels and renewable energy, and they're not willing to consider agricultural solutions. It's verboten. It's connected to our consumption and therefore not talked about at any COP summit.
But hang on, before we blame them, you know, as I like to say, when I point a finger at you, there are three pointing back at me. So when you say they, and you mean the corporations and so on, what about the environmental organizations? Okay, there was a fellow at university with me, he's dead now, I believe, and 40 years ago, roughly, he arranged for me to give a talk at Godalming in the headquarters of the World Wildlife Fund. Now, they're all about saving wildlife and biodiversity. So I went to London, drove out there with him, went into their headquarters, was introduced to some lovely people, biologists, ecologists, working for the World Wildlife Fund. They all knew which room I was giving the talk in. I went with my friend to the talk where we had the projector and everything. Not one of them would attend. They boycotted the meeting in their own building. So it's no good us blaming the corporations. It's all of us. It's our environmental organizations. They are a bigger danger to wildlife than poachers are. Poachers are not destroying the habitat. The moment you stop the poaching, the animals recover. We know that from our tsetse destruction, where we tried to destroy all the animals to stop the blood supply to tsetse flies. I was one of the people that got that stopped, 1959, and the game recovered in those parks today. So poachers are not causing the habitat destruction. That is being caused by us professional people, biologists, ecologists, and reductionist management.
This is Sailesh Rao's graphic that I've got behind me, and it shows how the wildlife have diminished, but it's indicting this feeding system, essentially the CAFO system that are feeding all the plants to the animals. And you would be opposed to that sort of a system, I'm assuming.
Well, totally, that's the commercial model. That's what we're trying to get rid of, but accidentally you're supporting it. Because you're not challenging the management. You're challenging the actions. You see, you're challenging those actions. And if you change actions, the problem continues because the actions aren't causing it. What's causing it is the decision-making, how you decide the actions.
I think that a lot of governments find making decisions about food a lot more difficult than decisions about fossil fuels. So that's one of the reasons why food is off the table in any sort of these top-down solutions. We're not waiting for the vegan law of 2020. It's not going to happen. It has to be a cultural shift based on science. We have to have scientific backing rather than just saying that it's not nice to kill animals. We have to really show that it's necessary for us to not only change our food system that's depleting our planet, but also causing climate change and find the solutions where we can fix climate change.
Yeah, and you see, if you argue about changing the food system and say supporting permaculture, organic, anything like that, then other people argue their approach. And that is the reductionist management, and that causes conflict. So if you look at the national parks, which I sent something to Jamin about it. If you look at, let's take a case that most people won't get heated about, would agree. And so if I picked any situation in the world to see if it was management was the problem or actions, I would pick national parks, because if I picked a forest or I picked a grassland or I picked almost anything, somebody would blame something. They would blame corporate greed or the food system or something. So I've picked on national parks and said, let's look at this. So 11,000 plus scientists recently released a report calling this a climate emergency now. And you've got people like Greta Thunberg appealing to world leaders to do something about it. and people are accusing them of not having the political will to do anything. So you've got this clamor, and you've got these conferences that just keep failing. So I'm saying, all right, let's take that and accept that it's not coal and oil, it's not livestock causing desertification and climate change. They're resources. They can't cause a problem. It's how you manage them that causes it. Now, if I'm right in saying that, then where could we look at management where we can all agree? And I used the example with the consciousness case just now. If we look at national parks, everybody agrees it's a good idea. Everybody agrees it's to restore high biodiversity, productivity, save the insects, the birds, everything there. If there's nothing we can blame, we can't blame the corporations, we can't blame fossil fuels, we can't blame livestock. There's nothing we can blame. The only thing that's there is management by the best scientists we have in each country, managing them. We can agree on that. So I've said, why don't we then look at national parks? And if we were to look at them, where would we? The rainfall in London, the rainfall in Johannesburg are about the same, but they're very different climates. So if we looked at national parks in the coral reefs, the oceans, the wetlands, the east and west coast of America, France, Britain, there's not much wrong. Our management's okay. Well, what about the climates like Johannesburg? The same rainfall, but different climate. Now, if we looked at New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Namibia, Kenya, whatever, UAE, Israel, we'll look at these national parks. Now, what do we find? We find horrific environmental destruction, destruction of biodiversity, climate change. Now, what are we going to blame? You see, if we can get the world to focus on that. Now, when we look at the national parks, let me take the African ones as an example. All the experts, international experts, local experts, what they're advocating is secure the borders, stop the poaching, more militant action to stop the poaching, burn the grasslands to give more green flush and stop the oxidation, sterilize the elephants, the females, drug and translocate the elephants to other areas because they're blaming too many elephants, cull the elephants. And that's what I talked about in the TED talk, that my big mistake doing. They talk about, they've just had a big conference in Botswana and they decided to restart the sport hunting to do it. Now, already we know that Kenya, when they banned the hunting, the wildlife decreased 60%. So, and environmental organizations are opposing them hunting again. So whatever one of these things we look at, there's conflict. You look at any one of those and whoever's looking at it or advocating is in conflict with someone else. And each organization, environmental organization, each professional ego is getting involved. They're all competing for funds. They're all vying for validity of their solution. And I don't care what you do, it'll keep deteriorating and be in conflict. That's exactly what's happening at COP25 in Madrid. Conflicting political views, chaos, confusion. So I'm suggesting a way around that. And what I'd like to do is to find somebody with the power, the convening power, that could get world leaders to observe and us just bring the people together around these national parks where I am. Because if we got them together and we got the heads of the environmental organizations internationally, the heads of all the animal lovers and people violently against hunting, the people who are actually the hardcore poachers, and gave them an amnesty and got them there. We bring in the chiefs, the headmen, the people surrounding me who live with the game. We bring in the government senior researchers and biologists. We bring them all together and we say, let's not discuss any of these practices because the practices are not the problem. The problem is management. So now, before we discuss any practice and get into conflict, why don't we agree on a holistic context, a reason for our management? And we have already done that twice. getting all the people we could. We couldn't get the big names, the big egos, the institutions, they boycotted. But we got everybody we could there, and everybody agreed on a context. And the moment we had that context, we could look at every one of these suggestions without conflict and just talking about them. Each one, we could say, that sounds a good idea. Now let's look at it in this context. And as we did, they broke down. We could see bits of them that would be good, bits in others that would be good. And we realized we're going to have to expand our vision, that everybody's land's deteriorating, not just the national parks. But the place of wildlife is everywhere. It's not being forced into parks. The place of agriculture is the production of food and fiber to feed the world's land, people, right? So we have to start looking at all of this. And as we did so, we began to see, oh my God, we could solve this. The knowledge is there. The willpower is there. What is blocking us is reductionist management that causes conflict and causes global climate change. So unless we can get you vegans joining the rest of the world on opposing the cause of climate change, you will never see the world you hope for. That I promise you. That I'll stake my life on.
At the end of your TED Talk, you mentioned that this is the only way to feed the world and fight climate change at the same time, which kind of feels like a silver bullet kind of comment. Is that it was a good closer, I suppose. Well, would you think that there's room for other things? Is holistic management scalable to meet the appetite of the growing middle class?
Holistic management is scalable globally. It's not about livestock. It's not about land. It's about managing complexity. So if you just want to stop the drug problem with kids in America, you're going to have to manage holistically. That policy is reductionist.
A lot of people confuse what your point is, because a lot of people who just say we need cows in order to fight climate change. See, Ellen says cows fight climate change, so all cows are therefore good, which obviously is not the case.
You're right. This is what's bugged us. Almost nobody has fought the idea of managing holistically. All the fights come back to cows, because one of the two things I was able to discover, one was that management needs to be holistic. I wish we'd never had to talk about goddamn cows. Management has to be holistic or we're gone. We have to manage complexity. Now, period. Now, once you're managing complexity, you face the issue that I've kept questioning Salish about, where I said, how are you going to stop the desertification of Southern California? Using the tools. We're a tool using animal. Now, scientists, people believe there are thousands of options. I was heavily criticized by academics for the TED Talk when I said there is only one option left to mankind. I was heavily criticized. They said there are thousands of options. So that's what I was putting to Salish when I said, are there? What would you do in Southern California? What are the options? The options are to use technology. That's everything from chemicals to bulldozers to machines to axes to a spade to plant trees to plant trees to whatever, to use technology. That's one option. What's the second option? It's to use fire. What's the third option? And everybody dries up.
Well, figure out what's consuming all the water, right?
You can train in any university in the world, in any profession, and you're trained to use technology and fire, or to protect the land. That's it. That's the human toolbox, 3 tools. So again, now everybody digresses and starts arguing about the fact that you need another tool in the toolbox. I wouldn't use it in the wet forests of Brazil. I wouldn't use it. In many instances, they would be taken out because they shouldn't be there. But in other instances, like Southern California, trying to stop that desertification, I ask that of every Nobel laureate in the world. How are you going to do it with technology and fire? Or resting the land?
There's a lot of wisdom in that. There's Buckminster Fuller said, what we need is a tool. Give somebody a tool. Don't give them solutions. Just give them the tool, and then they'll be able to find the solutions.
Yeah. And Aldo Leopold,
veganism be a tool?
I believe Aldo Leopold said something much the same, where he said humans, you know, the axe, the fire, cow has destroyed the environment, but humans are going to have to use the axe, the fire, and the cow to restore it. So Aldo Leopold saw the wisdom of this too. Buckminster Fuller saw it, but for some reason, millions of people and academics, many academics can't see it. They have fought me for 70 years nearly, 60 years.
Do you think veganism could be a tool? Because I love environmentalists. They don't have to say that we need a vegan world, as you could describe, but to say we need as many vegans as possible. We need many people eating low on the food web.
Yeah, veganism is not a tool, it's a practice. You see, people say to me, isn't water a tool? No, because you've got to use it through technology. I can't even drink water without a cup. People say to me, well, isn't law a tool? Well, go and have a tree out there and I can use all my creativity and I can see, I could make wonderful furniture out of it. The tree will stand. I could say, well, it needs labor. I could bring all the people in the world and claw at the tree with our hands, it would stand, nothing would happen. I could say it needs money. I could pile millions of dollars around the tree, it would just stand there. I could say, well, water's a tool. Well, pour water on the tree, still nothing happens. I don't make furniture. I could say, well, law is a tool. Well, I could bring all the lawyers to talk to the tree and it would stand there. The moment I use my creativity, my labor, my money, and pick up an axe, I can start to make the furniture.
Now, holistic management is a tool, so that it's...
No, holistic management is a process to manage complexity. That's all it is. So one of the, I think I mentioned this yesterday, one of the nice examples I often talk about, is a single woman from Africa who came and stayed with my wife and I. She had a son she was raising as a single mother. She was training to go and train people back in Africa and how to develop a holistic context and teach people how to make their decisions towards what they want in their culture and their lives, etc. And she said, couldn't I do this myself? And I said, yes. And she said, would you help me? And I said, yeah. So we sat by my dining room table, got out a pad, and I said, okay, now, what are you managing? You're not managing land. It's just you, a single mother and a job, and your son. I said, who makes your management decisions? She said, well, nobody. I do, and my son's helping me. And I said, has anybody got veto power over your decisions? No. Okay. Now, who's affected and who affects you? Well, the people that employ me, people around me, everybody else. Okay, now we've got an idea of it. All right, so what do we need to do is describe how you want your life to be. And so we got her to do that. How do you want your life to be? And she spelled out the life she wants with her raising her son. And it was hers. And all I was watching is there's no prejudice against a future action or a belief, All right, so they're just keeping prejudice out, thank you. And when she got that, I said, all right, you're not managing land, but everything you eat comes from the land. The air you're breathing right now, the oxygen is coming from plants. Everything you throw out is going back to the environment. So you're not managing land, but how will the land and the environment have to be 200-300 years from now for your great-great-grandchildren to enjoy a life like that? So we described that. Clean air, you can drink the water, clean water, etc. Nutritious food being produced, blah, blah, blah. All right, now I said, you've got many people you're dependent on. You can't change them. How are you going to have to be? How are you going to have to behave for people to be loyal to you, back you? You're going to have to be honest. Are there degrees of honesty, or is it like pregnancy? Have you tried being a little bit pregnant? Okay, no, they're not degrees of honesty. You're going to have to be honest. You're going to have to be open, good attitude, etc., etc. But it was hers. When she'd got that written on half a sheet of paper, it's not a lot of words, right? I said, now, there it is. Start making all your decisions in that context. And about 2 weeks later, she came to me excited and said, damn it, this works. And I said, what happened? She said, well, I went shopping. I took my shopping list and my son, we went to the supermarket. We got one of the big trolleys, went around putting things in, checking off the shopping list, got to the checkout counter. There were 6 people ahead of us, but we had to wait. And while I was waiting, I thought of the context for my life that you'd help me draw up. And she said, I looked at my shopping list and I thought, what is the context for each of these things? And it was need, desire, desire, desire. And she said, I sheepishly went back and put half of it back on the shelves. I realized I did not desire them more than I desired a well-educated son, etc., etc.
I started putting the meat back on the shelf 4 years ago. I'm going to pass on the talking stick.
Anyway, that is holistic management. No cows. That's what I'm talking about. And people keep dragging it back to cattle and animals, as this whole discussion yesterday and today keeps going back to.
All right, beautiful. Well, Forrest has been incredibly patient.
And this is the last one.
Okay, last one. Forrest, please take it away.
Yes. Wow, I really don't. I'm kind of excited, and Dr. Savory, I really appreciate your time today, and I appreciate everyone's comments and this beautiful dialogue. Actually, I wanted to maybe end your meeting if you could plug your organization. I know of you from the TED Talk. And I just fell in love. We're curious on how involved you are.
Hey, Forrest, we're having trouble. Forrest, we're having
organization. Yes. Sorry.
Forrest, can you move closer to your router?
Is that better?
Yeah, that's getting better.
Is that better?
Much better, Forrest.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, sorry about that. My garage is kind of a dead spot for my Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yeah, so my question is for Dr. Savory, if he can expand on his organization, what kind of like grants or scholarship programs they might have. When I moved the family from Tokyo to Southern California, that's kind of in the backdrop here. And our neighborhood, for instance, was also part of a fire 3 years ago that took out almost 300 homes. It's a real problem. And I really love what he does, and I'd like to really be involved. Unfortunately, finances are always a hindrance. And so I want to know about grants and how well that organization is growing. I'd really love to get involved with it, and not just me, but for other people, a process as far as the certifications. They might see this, they might not know of you or your organization. I'd like to at least give this last chance for you to plug it, and more importantly, say thank you for what you've done. And I'll let you have the floor. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Forrest. And first, let me correct it. I'm not Dr. Savory. I'm just an ordinary guy. I wore and I never went to. I was all ready to go do my PhD at Berkeley. And as I always say, thank God war intervened and I stayed in my country. And we never would have solved this problem if I had gone on as an academic. We had to solve it in many countries, many situations, etc., as I explained yesterday. So, but thanks for that. Now, there's a new hub starting in California. There's one up in the north, a new one. I was recently down meeting some of the people in about midway in California. And So you can get involved. There's a website. It's very, very easy to remember because it's www and then just savory.global. You know, is the organization. And we encourage people everywhere around the world to do their own thing, to be self-independent, etc. And I mentioned there are about 50 locally led, locally managed, holistic management hubs now on 6 continents, and just try to get involved in some way with them. And there's different levels of training. There's self-help materials that can be provided, but we try to direct it all through the local hub, local people, local organizations are coming together. A lot of health food people are coming together because they realize that through the food we can get into the city populations, because nearly all the political power, economic power has gone to the cities now, and there's a tremendous ignorance of the environment in those. So these hubs are developing, and that's how we're trying to work as a global network of people around the thing. We're a very small organization, just a very big network developing and a small organization. But you can contact them. Their headquarters are at Boulder. I don't live there. I live between Florida and Zimbabwe. They gather all over the place in gatherings. I'm going to a gathering with some of the hub leaders in Australia shortly. Just get involved is all I can say. If you care enough, and they'll start helping you to help yourself and your community. But thank you. And Jamin, if I could say, I must go now.
Absolutely.
Thank you all, and Silas, thanks for being and not throwing something at me.
No. Silas had to take off a little bit ago, and he texted me. Back.
Well,
anyway,
thank you,
Alan.
And that's what you're trying to do.
Alan, on behalf of all of us, we thank you tremendously for being so extremely generous with your time, over 6.5 hours over the course of 2 days, and handling lots of questions, potential misunderstandings, etc. And we would love to have you back again and again and again. The block party lives on every Friday for 24 hours straight, starting at 6 a.m. Pacific time. Whether you're in Africa or the United States, this is your home, Alan. We need you here, and we need your wisdom and your open-mindedness, your open heart. Please keep coming. We love you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks all of you. George, Boris, the rest of you, thank you. Ray, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All righty. Well, the block party continues. We went a little bit over time on that last segment because there was a lot of questions and whatnot. I want to thank our next speaker, Michael Gallo, for your patience in hanging in there with us. Michael is going to give a super cool talk called Mythos, Co-Creating a New Story for Humanity. All right, Michael, oh yeah, here, I'm just going to pause recording just for a second.